Dragon Ball Daima is the best thing from the franchise since the end of Dragon Ball Z. No, this title is not clickbait, and no, there is not an artificial segment inflating the runtime of this project. This video is my love letter to Dragon Ball Daima, the ultimate modern Dragon Ball experience. This has been a long time in the making, and to ensure that my passion for this show is well represented, I've tried my best to make sure that all my thoughts, both critiques and praise, are communicated within a single mega review. To be fully transparent, I started scripting this video with this thesis back after episode 17 first aired, and to get an accurate grasp on my thoughts, I rewatched the entirety of the show. At the time of recording this intro, Daima's dub is long past its completion, and everything besides this intro and the conclusion are fully scripted, and mostly everything is fully edited. All of that is to say, the idea of recency bias has been long gone from my mind. This video features an in-depth review of every individual episode of Daima. Within each review, I provide a brief summary, give my own critiques and rating. Then I will rank each episode of Daima from worst to best. From here, I give some overarching thoughts about Daima's plot and story. Then is a review of the characters of Daima, including both the original Dragon Ball cast and the new magical additions. After this is a segment reflecting on Daima's relation to Dragon Ball GT, and keeping the comparison train going, there will be an explanation as to why Daima stands above every Dragon Ball story post-Z. This includes all of GT and all of Super. And to end off the video, there will be some reflections on the fanbase and the franchise as a whole. Thank you all so much for waiting, and without further ado, let's get into episode 1. If I were to describe episode 1 of Daima in one word, I would call it beautiful. The main purpose of this extended length episode is to introduce the viewer to the Dragon Ball world, as well as the plot unfolding in front of us. The former is achieved by a narrated recap that tells us the importance of Saiyan nature, who Goku is, and what the Dragon Balls are. We get the gist of Goku's role as Earth's protector, as well as his relationship with his friends. Getting into the present, Daima immediately introduces us to the Demon Realm and its new characters, Goma and Degasu, as well as their relationship to Babidi, Dabura, and Shin. Both of them have a disdain for Babidi for tricking Dabura, as Goma was the Supreme Demon King's right-hand man. Degasu is revealed to be Shin's younger brother. We see these two goobers witnessing the events of the Buu saga. What follows are stellar recreations of the Z manga that display the Buu story beats that are pertinent to the events of Daima. They comment on how Earth has its own Dragon Balls that seem to be easier to obtain than the Demon Realm ones. After figuring out that the death of Dabura means that Goma is the new Demon King, we meet the new character Dr. Arinsu. Arinsu, similar to Degasu, is Shin's sister. It's clear that she has her own goals separate from the duo, as she essentially tricks Goma into thinking that the Z Fighters might come and usurp his rule. This gives Goma the wonderful idea to travel to Earth and use the Dragon Balls to turn the Z Fighters into kids, rendering them useless fighters. Goma wants to use the second wish to get something called the Tertian Oculus, and that's a surprise tool that'll help us later. While plotting, we see that someone is watching them. The two recruit the old senile Namekian, Neva, to go to Earth and use the Dragon Balls. While traveling, we learn that Arinsu followed Babidi and Dabura back to Earth. We then cut to our home planet, where we see our Z-Fighters celebrating Trunks' 9th birthday, as well as the victory in the Buu saga. We learn some fun facts, including something about Saiyan nature, how Shin and Kibito are now defused, and why Gohan is absent from the story. Of course, after enjoying some food, Vegeta and Goku decide to spar high in the clouds. Meanwhile, at the lookout, Dende and Popo are considering joining the festivities until they are interrupted by Degasu, Goma, and Neva. Neva gathers the Dragon Balls and restores them to their Shenron summoning state, despite how recently they were used. This leads to Goma wishing the Z-Fighters to be kids, and the episode ends with their transformation into their mini selves. Now, there's a lot to be adored in Conspiracy. As I mentioned, the episode is absolutely beautiful. The art on almost all fronts is outstanding, and this applies to both the familiar and the new. The sinister and foreign atmosphere of the Demon Realm can be felt through the dark red hues and bizarre architecture of Goma's castle. One of my favorite things about the episode visually is how diverse the character expressions are. There are so many moments where you can pause the show and know exactly how the character are supposed to be feeling in any given moment. I know this might seem like a given for any good animated series, but I feel like this is something modern Dragon Ball has struggled with, unless said emotions were excited or angry. By far the most hype thing about the visuals that I'm all sure we can get behind are these recreations of iconic Dragon Ball scenes. Using manga panels verbatim when it came to recreating these moments really set the tone for how faithful this series is going to be to its predecessor. These snapshots also give way for us to see and admire the distinct art style of Dragon Ball Daima. Given that it is literally an adaptation of the same source material as the Z anime, the only difference between the two are how the individuals working on it choose to present it, and seeing that juxtaposition is really nice. On the story front, this episode excels. As previously mentioned, it is set up in a way that introduces the viewer to the Dragon Ball world, but also sets up the premise for the story's conflict. The way the pertinent beats of the original series are delivered are masterful in the way they differ in presentation. When it comes to overarching expository information regarding the premise of Dragon Ball and foundational themes, that is shown to us in the form of a narrator with some key visuals. While the specific moments of the Buu saga that are important for Daima are delivered via the new characters of the story experiencing them as well. It's a more creative and viewer-engaging way to frame these useful callbacks. Someone new to Dragon Ball is able to experience these moments for the first time, while the veteran is not only able to rehash the past in a beautiful manner, but witness these new characters react and plot around it. The fact that the whole series isn't summarized here is also pretty nice, as it doesn't front-load the watcher with a bunch of useless information, only with what is necessary to contextualize this show. Speaking of which, something that ought to be praised is the events of Daima are directly caused by the events of Z, which effectively set it up as a continuation of the Dragon Ball story. This is something neither of its other sequel Dragon Ball series do, at least not to the same extent nor to the same effectiveness. Next up, let's get to these new characters. Conspiracy introduces 5 new characters who are pertinent throughout Daima's run, all of which have neat and unique designs and personalities. Firstly, there's the 2 antagonists, Goma and Degasu. These two come off as sinister, but in all actuality, they're kind of incompetent goobers. The relationship between the two, with Goma being a silly magic man and Degasu being his loyal right-hand man, comes off quite naturally. I'm glad that even though we'll find out that Goma is just a wants-to-rule-the-world character, this series isn't afraid to make him look silly. Then there's the secondary antagonist, Orinsu. Orinsu and Degasu are both siblings of Shin, which can be inferred just solely on their designs. Her status as a crafty witch also comes off to the viewer just by witnessing her interactions with Goma and Degasu. Neva is also a pretty intriguing new character whose sheer existence vastly expands Dragon Ball lore and the history of the Namekians. He is probably the most effective example of the sage archetype we've seen in the series so far. And finally, there's Glorio, who, in this episode, doesn't do much, but what I can say about these 5 in their totality is that they all have very Dragon Ball designs. They're all oozing with charm despite how simplistic they are. We can say and infer quite a bit about them just by looking at them. I already mentioned how Degasu and Orinsu are clearly Shin siblings, but look at a design like Goma's. We can tell that this guy, if he's strong at all, it isn't due to any typical means of strength within the Dragon Ball verse. The funny horns on his crown and his sleazy eyes reflect the fact that he is a mischievous goober. Glorio by far has the most basic design of these 5, but just by looking at him we can tell that he's a character born from Universe 7 and has seen some amount of combat. His blank expression and dull eyes reflect the fact that he's the brooding type. All of this is to say that if you're not bought in on these characters yet, you can't deny that their designs scream Dragon Ball and align very comfortably with the rest of the franchise. And now, I'll finally give my thoughts on the actual story and its delivery. The pacing of Conspiracy is divine. There is not a single wasted moment in this episode. Everything shown and said contributes directly to either the overarching story, introduces important characters, or adds additional layers to the Dragon Ball world or lore. While I'm on that point, the world building of this entire show is just immaculate and insane, so much so that it deserves its own video. But just know that I'm keeping tabs and have been making a Mondo list of things separate from the script of the things that Daima adds to the Dragon Ball world. If you watched all of Daima and haven't rewatched this episode since it came out, I strongly encourage you to do so, because you'll find that literally almost every important story beat is cocked, loaded, and ready to fire in this episode. Even endgame stuff like the evil third eye and Purunga are displayed here, making a really tight-knit start to a tight-knit story. The preliminary scene with the Z Fighters was also a nice reintroduction to them and introduced everyone necessary quite effectively. They even did the give them a slight redesign to show that time has passed thing that most series do. In regard to the plot itself, it tracks. I mentioned how I like that the Buu saga is so closely related to this story. Furthermore, the fact that Orinsu pushes Goma to retaliate against the Z Fighters is such an effective way to show off these characters and hint at what's to come. It adds an additional layer of irony to the story in that if Goma just hadn't listened to Orinsu here, he probably would have ruled forever and no one would have done anything about it, but because he gave into his paranoia, his rule inevitably comes to an end. I also want to mention Neva here, as he does some stuff that has some pretty huge implications on Dragon Ball. His interactions with the Dragon Balls themselves on the lookout may be jarring and strange, but I think the point is to display just how powerful and mysterious he is as a character. And lastly, for the pro section, Jakajan is a goated song, and I will get more into the intro once we're done with episode 2. But what don't I like about episode 1? The list is pretty short, but I need to be fair, as if I'm not, I'm going to get accused of blindly glazing the series, and I want to prevent that. First off, and probably most importantly, Goma's plan is pretty goofy. Not goofy in a charming way, goofy in a how the hell did you think this was going to go kind of way. I understand that he wanted to make the Z-Fighters more helpless, but if this was his goal, why didn't he wish for them all to be babies and then just, take them out? The fact that they take Dende is something that makes sense, but all he really did was give the Z-Fighters more of a reason to come back into the Demon Realm and kick his ass. Also, yes, I know they take Dende at the start of episode 2, but I figured I would just sum up the plot point here as to not needlessly tread old ground later in the video. To be charitable, I do think this plot stuff is the necessary evil to get the ball rolling on the series, and honestly, if the rest of the episode had more flaws, I probably wouldn't even have mentioned something like this. Going back to Dende, now maybe this is just me, but I feel like Dende does shockingly little to stop Goma and Degasu from doing this. We know he can telepathically communicate with Piccolo, who can get there instantly with the help of Goku, but he sort of just, lets this happen and doesn't question why they want the Dragon Balls until they are literally about to be wished upon. It just seems they sort of dumbed him down to allow the wish to happen. And finally, still in this scene, I've never really been a big fan of CGI Shenron. Admittedly, he doesn't look that bad on rewatch, nor does he look that bad in Jaka-Jan, but compared to the stellar visuals all over the rest of the show, he really sticks out. Overall, I would give Conspiracy an 8.5 out of 10. The highs are highs, and the lows aren't that low, and I would say it's a damn near perfect introductory episode, and holy shit, we're going to be here a while if the rest of the episodes take this long. Glorio is an episode that stands as the natural follow-up to Conspiracy, and get ready for me to say stuff like that a lot. This show flows really well. With episode 1 establishing our antagonists, their goals, and their initial move against our heroes, episode 2 establishes our heroes and their response to this move. We see that Shenron refuses to give extra wishes out to first-timers, so frustrated, Goma and Degasu leave and take Dende with them, to either get some Dragon Balls out of him or use him as a hostage. After becoming children, we see the reactions of Goku, Vegeta, and Co. at the party. Naturally, they're surprised and want to find out what's going on, so they end up going to the lookout, where Mini Popo remains and Dende is gone. Popo explains what happened, and that these folks came from the Demon Realm, and that an old Namekian named Neva came with them, and now the primary goal of our series is set. Go to the Demon Realm to rescue Dende, and figure out who turned them into kids and why. Shin remembers that back in his world, there lies a spaceship that he took to escape the Demon Realm. Kibito goes and grabs it, and Bulma starts working on repairs, as the ship was damaged after the showdown for the universe. We see that Goku and the other fighters aren't used to their bodies, so they spend a couple days on the lookout, training while Bulma fixes the ship. During this time, Goku remembers his power pole and goes to Master Korin, and then Roshi to find it. Over dinner, the gang discuss how in the Demon Realm, many species chose to flee and escape their oppressive rulers. This dinner is cut short with another ship arriving in the sky and descending over the lookout. The man who comes from the ship is none other than Glorio. A man from the third Demon Realm requests that Goku joins him, and he needs his strength to defeat Goma. Upon Shin's insistence, he decides to join as well, as the three hop in and head off, leaving Bulma, Vegeta, and Piccolo on Earth to continue working on repairs, as they will join them soon. Similar to Episode 1, there's a lot to love about Episode 2. Firstly, this is the debut of the mini designs, and although I understand why it turned folks off the series, I can't lie, they're pretty funny and cute. Especially seeing a character like Vegeta, who's so full of angst, but he's in the body of like a 5-year-old, it's just really funny. Along with this, we see that Goku and Piccolo have to acclimate to their new bodies, which results in some good physical comedy. It's also refreshing to see Goku actually have to get used to such a permanent debuff to himself. Finally, with the comedy, they do this funny gag with Kibito and Bulma, of all characters, with Kibito being the servant, to the god of the universe, right? Becomes Bulma's errand boy, and I think that's just pretty funny. Similar to Episode 1, Episode 2 is beautiful. They keep the awesome artwork train going with the fun little action sequences of Goku with the power pole. We also get these based stills of the Battle of the Universe, which is nothing short of amazing. From this point forward, I want to establish that if I don't mention the visuals in the pro section, just assume the show is keeping up with this amazing quality, because I don't want to repeat myself 20 times. To get into the quality of the plot, I feel like this episode is the natural progression of the first, with Glorio's introduction being the shakeup of it. This is also the first episode where we see the potency of the love put into it when it comes to the characterization. While Episode 1 makes callbacks to the Buu saga that represent the idea that they know their source material and the important details needed for the story, Episode 2 gives us the first snippets of the characterization that are nostalgic and perfectly representative of the original series. Seeing Goku interact with his old masters is the perfect example of this. Korin's comment about how Goku is always in a rush perfectly encapsulates the character for the viewer. Or seeing Goku grab the Niobo and flash it with a classic "ta-da!" and then the reference it to Bulma in a brief interaction that poignantly reminds us of the importance and everlasting nature of their friendship. This episode formally introduces us to Glorio, who for now is on our side, but Shin has a suspicion of him being here, which is delivered to us in a way that tracks with the rest of the story thus far. To get into the downsides of this episode, pretend I waited to mention them kidnapping Dende for right here. We're still going to talk about the little green guy though, because there are some odd implications of Goma's wish that deserves to be called out. Is Dende conscious? Like, Goten and Trunks seem to have the same cognitive power and could even communicate with each other, but it's unclear if this is happening with Dende. I bring this up because Dende is giggling when he gets taken by Degasu and doesn't seem to mind the fact that he's getting kidnapped, meaning that he either has the cognition of an infant, which doesn't track with Goten and Trunks, or Dende is literally about to have like the worst month or like couple of weeks in his life. Also on this topic, there's a lot of characters who get turned into children who probably shouldn't, or vice versa. Like, the wish made is turn the ones who fought Majin Buu and all their friends into children. It's obvious why this includes Goku and Vegeta as they beat Buu, but the word friends is doing a lot of work here. Characters like Bulma, the Ox King, and even Marin were turned into kids, even though they weren't doing anything against Buu, which implies that they're under the friends category. Meanwhile, it seems like Korin is still an adult here, and if so, why? If Marin, who did nothing but sit with her mother, was turned into a child, then why didn't the cat that literally taught Goku and has known Goku and has trusted Goku ever since his youth not get turned into a kid? Or what about like everyone on Earth who helped beat Buu? Is contributing to the Spirit Bomb not considered fighting? It's something that only starts to falter while under scrutiny, and it isn't too distracting, but it would be disingenuous for me not to mention it. Episode 2, Glorio, gets a 7.5 out of 10. It's not as good as the first, and it doesn't have as many highs, but it works really well as a secondary expository episode. With the conclusion of Episode 2, it's the perfect time to talk about Daima's intro and outro. Jakajan is a goated song. It's incredibly groovy and has beautiful visuals to complement it. Like, I can't stress enough how much I love this opening sequence. Jakajan plays in 18 of the 20 episodes of Daima, and I'm not kidding you guys, on this rewatch, I watched it every single time. It does the funny anime intro thing where it subtly reveals the entire plot through its visuals, but the manner in which it does so is so beautiful and creative that I can forgive it. There's so many Kino shots present in this opening. Literally the first shot features Goku reaching his arm out, and even though it is from the perspective of his arm and hand, you can tell he's shrinking into his mini self. It's just so clean. It shows some awesome camera work of the Dragon Balls going through Warp Sama and getting to the Demon Realm. We see the Tamagamis and other original characters. And then Goku soaring through the clouds on the Nimbus, and then the shift to him basking in the sunlight is just so glorious that it might just be the greatest visual in the entire show. We see the evil third eye in the final battleground that Goma makes starting from the intro's debut, acting as great foreshadowing. Also, Goku doing the Kamehameha at the camera, is that a GT reference? Because if so, based. While I'm not equipped with the skills to do hardcore musical analysis, I can say that I enjoy Jakajan's upbeat tone and groovy synth. But, by far my favorite part of Jakajan is the lyrics. The song's lyrics perfectly reflect the tone and themes of Dragon Ball Daima, with the first verse getting into the importance of having fun and never giving up. While I can't say for sure, it seems that an element that got lost in translation is a direct reference to Akira Toriyama himself. The chorus makes reference to how this is the song of courage, with full-throttle battles and non-stop excitement, and it ends with Shenron being summoned and someone wishing to meet someone great tomorrow. The second verse speaks about the same ideas, preaching about how it's important to not hesitate towards your future, with the last line of the song calling out to extend the Niobo, Goku's power pole, far into the sky to separate the clouds as the new light shimmering down will guide them into tomorrow. Overall, the song stands as just a beautiful and uplifting tribute to the Dragon Ball franchise as a whole, and of course, Akira Toriyama. Nakama is also pretty cool. Like a lot of other anime outros, it features concept art that reflects the general vibe of the show. Some of my favorites include Goku and Vegeta posing with Hibis, and then Goku and Glorio on the rock. I don't feel as strongly about the song as I do Jaka-Jan, and that's okay. One thing I do love about it, however, is the reference to Bird Studio at the end, once again solidifying these songs as tributes to Toriyama. Episode 3, titled Daima, is the debut of the Demon Realm, the overarching setting of the story. Now yes, I know it appears in episode 1 with the Goma scenes, but this episode is the first to explore the intricacies of it. This episode decides to reuse the cold open from the first, and we'll see that it'll pick and choose whether to start with this in full or just cut to Jaka-Jan. This one picks up right where the last one left off, with Shin, Goku, and Glorio riding off into space and heading towards the Demon Realm. Shin questions Glorio's intentions, establishing and reaffirming his mistrust of him. Glorio talks about how he was hired by King Kadan, a character that'll be revealed later in the show. We once again see Warp-sama, who is the guard of this junction of the Dragon Ball mythos. This scene shows Goku calling Warp-sama a big goldfish, and also establishes the running gag of Goku mispronouncing Glorio's name. It's after this interaction our three heroes end up in the third demon world. Upon entering, Glorio explains that they must traverse through the three worlds to get to Goma. Goku tries acclimating to the new environment and comments on how hard it is to fly. We find out that this is due to the thick air of the third demon world. To get an example of this in action, a group of bandits attack our group, and Goku manages to easily maneuver around their slow-moving arrows. After this brief interaction, SG Squared end up staying at a hotel and visiting a tavern. It's through these scenes we get some additional characterization of Glorio and this world. The third demon world is essentially the Wild West with bandits and bar fights galore. We see that Glorio is used to this environment as he has no problems bribing folks and using force if need be. While at the tavern, Goku gets into a bar fight, which is the main action sequence of this episode. The episode ends with Goku easily beating the tavern folk, and as a result, their plane gets stolen, leaving them stranded in this town. As previously mentioned, this is the debut of the Demon Realm as the setting for the story, and I must say, it does a great job at establishing it and making it unequivocally distinct from Earth. This is something I feel like Dragon Ball has always excelled at, and here it is no different. The Demon Realm feels more than just different alien planets. From the way the different creatures roam, to the planets on the ground, to the floating rocks and planets that inhabit the sky, almost everything shown contributes to a world that feels lived in and foreign. Furthermore, god damn, there's just so much world building and lore present in this episode. I want to keep the episode summary section somewhat short, as if I didn't, most of the video would be detailing all the lore dropped throughout. So just trust me when I say that there is so much to explore here. From the Sea of Darkness, to the air of the Demon Realm, the Deborah statue, the different types of creatures, Daima keeps the viewer learning more stuff about Dragon Ball and its different realms. We also get some heavy lore about how Shin is a Glind, a species native to the second demon world, and that there seems to be a level of classism across these different worlds. Plot-wise, this episode is fun. Getting introduced to the Demon Realm the way we do is pretty awesome, and seeing Goku fight the riffraff of the Demon Realm is an effective way to show his mastery in martial arts, while also displaying how nerfed he currently is due to him not being used to his shrunken body. This is also a rather foreign setting for an action scene of the series like Dragon Ball. Like, how many fights can you recall past OG Dragon Ball that take place completely and totally confined within a small building? A building equipped with large stage hazards that are then used to enhance the fight scene. And seeing Goku fight like this is just refreshing. I really don't have much to complain about this episode. If I were to nitpick the plot, there is one point that's a bit silly, being Shin's concern to tell Kibito about the code needed to go through Warp-sama. And it makes sense why Shin is concerned, but this ends up meaning nothing in the grand scheme of things. Other than that, this episode just doesn't have as high highs as episodes 1 and 2, and because of that, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Still good, pretty good, but not great. Something of note is that this is the first episode where we really get a feel on how they're characterizing Goku in this series. He's definitely more juvenile than his Buu Saga counterpart, but it isn't in a way that feels detrimental to the story or his character. Just a display of quirks and a revisiting of the childlike wonder and curiosity that used to be so prevalent in him in the original series. I, for one, really like this, but I can understand why it might not be everyone's cup of tea. At least not yet. I'll quit the fence sitting on this soon. With their plane getting stolen, SG Squared continue their journey on foot. While traversing the third demon world, our gang gets attacked by a big creature that is then defeated by Glorio. Glorio asks Goku and Shin how Goku is able to read energy. Shin tells him what ki is and that Goku can read it. They then stop at a mom and pop shop in the goal of getting food and finding a way across the wasteland. Glorio manages to haggle the man running the shop into getting them a sky seed, But before we see what this looks like, we get introduced to Demon Realm medicine, Medibugs. Goku convinces Glorio to pick up some revive bugs, which are essentially sensu beans, but also the join bug. A bug that, when consumed, will combine nearby individuals, effectively giving us a third method of fusion. SG Squared then ride the Sky Seed, which is essentially a giant catapult through the sky and manages to travel hundreds of miles to their next destination. Shortly after landing, Glorio tells Goku about the Tamagamis and the prospect of fighting them for the Dragon Balls. This excites Goku, and now their secondary goal is to collect the 3 Dragon Balls of the Demon Realm. Shin still has a distrust of Glorio's intentions. Our heroes then run into a local town where we are introduced to Goma's gendarmerie? Hope I'm saying that right? Who seem to be terrorizing it. This scene that plays out in front of us involves them taking money from the locals. If the locals fail to provide said money, they are then taken, and we see as their life force is literally extracted from them and turned into some sort of goo. This gets interrupted by a short masked hero who pulls out a bomb to distract the gendarmerie. This bomb ends up failing, from which Goku intervenes and ends up wiping them out. The action scene of Goku versus the gendarmerie is quite fun and involves Goku fighting in the closed quarters area of a street alley. After their defeat, the masked hero joins SG Squared and she takes off her mask, marking the end of the episode. Chatty is a fun one. A bit slower paced than the couple before it, but in my mind it makes up for it with the enjoyable character interactions and just continuing the natural fleshing out of this environment. I'm sure I sound like a broken record at this point, but I mean it when I say that these early episodes handle exposition masterfully. None of it seems forced, as it all naturally comes up in the plot and serves to either build the world or hype up the antagonist. The Sky Seed is an item that I think makes sense. It tracks that there's a fast method of travel that is cheaper but more dangerous than a plane within the Demon Realm. Many bugs existing are a fun way to flavor over-the-counter medicine and bring a fresh coat of paint to items and mechanics that have been present in Dragon Ball for as long as we can remember. Finally, the introduction of the Gendarmerie is a perfect way to show how much of an evil force Goma is. Even if he is a goofy guy, this scene reminds us that he is an oppressive ruler who's willing to literally suck the life out of his subjects for more gold and power. While we're on the point of the Gendarmerie, Goku's fight with them at the end of the episode is pretty cool. Similar to the last episode, it's always a pleasant sight to see Goku fight in environments we're not used to seeing him fight in. As for the plot stuff, I really like the idea that Glorio doesn't know what Ki is. This gets fleshed out as the series goes on, but Daima raises an interesting question regarding the difference between Ki and magic. While we know for a fact that magic is a different type of power system within Dragon Ball, and that's a fact present within both Z and Super, Daima sort of implies there's less of a difference between them than we may think, and that it might be more of a semantic difference. Now, enjoying this narrative decision may be more of a subjective take, but regardless, I think all fans can get behind how, at the very least, this series is exploring magic as a power within Dragon Ball. While ever present within the franchise, we knew very little about it before Daima, which is now remedying that gap of knowledge. Okay, so you guys know how I was like, oh, Sunil quit the fence sitting like 3 minutes ago about Goku? Well, that's right now because Daima Goku is awesome. He's just so much fun. During the Sky Seed scene, Glorio is tensed up, racing for impact, Shin is screaming and freaking out, while Goku is having the time of his life, hooting and hollering as he barrels towards his potential doom. Like, watch that scene and tell me you hate this guy. You can't. The music and the voice acting of the scene is just so joyful. Also, like, come on. Look at him cheer with excitement after hearing about the Tamagamis. Like, this guy is so based. As for the cons in this episode, I don't have much. I think similar to the last, it just isn't as good as episodes 1 and 2, but there's nothing here that I am necessarily opposed to. As for some general notes, we learn that the heir of the third demon world is their way of further nerfing Mini Goku. That's theirs and the writers. Right in the beginning of the series, which I think is interesting. I must also say that so far the plot has continued in slow burn and natural progression, which I for one really like, but I can see this causing pacing issues if it keeps up. My final rating for Chatty is a solid 8 out of 10. Episode 5 is the one that formally introduces us to Pansy, as the episode is titled such, who's the official 4th member of our traveling group. She's a Majin child who's curious about the strength of Goku and the intentions of our main characters. Goku and Shin are welcoming to this questioning, but Glorio is skeptical of Pansy and wants her to buzz off. After accidentally revealing their current goal is Kadan Castle, Pansy insists that she joins the group, and Glorio inevitably gives in. There's some cool interactions here that involve another ki equals magic moment, as well as a rare instance of Goku referring to himself as Kakarot. We also learn that Pansy is a Bulma type who likes to tinker and can perform limited magical telekinesis. We then get a walk-in montage of our group who ends up at the castle. Once they arrive, we get the large bomb that Pansy is actually a princess and is the daughter of King Kadan. Speaking of the devil, this episode also formally introduces us to the king, who is a big, hardy guy that's intimidating, but seems to mean well. After hearing that Goku and Shin got turned into children and that they beat Boo, King Kadan's main goal is to overthrow Goma and bring peace to the Demon Realm. After learning that Goku wants to take on the Tamagamis, King Kadan wants to test his strength, so Goku fights his guards. This is the main action piece of the episode, which also gives us the first glimpse of Mini Super Saiyan in the show. Another important thing of note during this time is that Shin notices another sus thing about Glorio. Glorio lied to them, as Glorio told Goku and Shin that the king sent him after finding out they were young. But it seems that Glorio approached the king instead and asked King Kadan for permission to get Goku and Shin. During these scenes, we cut to the first demon world, where we see that baby Dende is being taken care of. Goma scolds the babysitter and says that she needs to take extra good care of him because he's going to make them another set of Dragon Balls for their world. And finally, this episode introduces Hybis, who's pretty much the last of the main characters introduced in this show. While Goku, Glorio, Shin, and now Pansy are on their way to the third Tamagami, Charlie Doppler is tasked with picking up Vegeta and Co. from the Kami's lookout. As the episode ends, our main cast plane breaks down and crashes to the ground. To start off with the pros, the titular character of this episode is a good addition to our crew. Pansy has a nice design, and the twist of her being the daughter of King Kadan comes off as natural. She contrasts well with Shin and Goku with her knowledge of the Demon Realm, but also Glorio as she's much more bubbly. While we're on new characters, the other two characters introduced in this episode either provide some cool world building, or are just really funny. King Kadan has a peak design that comes off as ragged and foreboding, but his performance and dialogue dismantle this intimidating nature. And finally, there's Hybis. I love this guy. He's so goofy in just about everything he does, but he's not distracting. This episode also has some pretty funny interactions, from Glorio calling King Kadan a mafia boss, to Goku explaining that he is already married and has kids, to literally everything with Hybis. It's just really good. The main action piece of this episode is also rather beautiful. We're still in filler fight territory, but I'm sure seeing Goku try to go Super Saiyan brought a lot of people back into the show. Finally, this episode displays Daima's potency when it comes to covering up plot holes and loose ends. I thought this after watching the specific interaction with King Kadan and Shin about giving Kibito and company the pin number. This episode is pretty good, and I don't have much to nitpick. When I watched it for this review, I was initially thinking that it seemed rather slow, but it dumped so much information on the viewer and introduced 3 new pivotal characters that would be hard to make many changes or deliver said information in a way that's more exciting and where nothing else would get lost. Essentially, it's best to describe this episode as a training/exposition one, so I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10, putting it at the same ranking as episode 2. With our gang's progress stunted yet again, episode 6 picks up with them discovering the source of their problems. Pansy packed too much luggage. While on the ground, Goku gets written out of the next scene because he has to poo, and the gendarmerie comes over to interrogate Pansy, Shin, and Glorio about Goku's whereabouts due to the events of the last episode, or the one before. This scene tells us that Glorio is from the first Demon Realm, Pansy is from the third, and Shin is from the second. If we include Goku, that means we have quite the diverse demonic cast. After the gendarmerie leave, our gang continues their journey in the plane where we finally get some cool lore about Shin. Shin is a Glind, who are beings born from trees. There are 5 Glind trees, and Arinsu, Shin, and Degasu were all born from the same tree. Because of their botanical origin, Glind don't really have an exact gender and don't eat meat. Fun fact for you guys, this is not the first time this fact has been a part of official Dragon Ball material, but it is the first time we've seen it so directly explained within the series. This scene also tells us that both Degasu and Arinsu are more ambitious than most Glind, and decided to stay behind in the Demon Realm to pursue said ambitions. After their flight, the gang land to camp out in a cave. While Goku, Pansy, and Shin are sleeping, Glorio goes to take a call. And we find out that Glorio has secretly been working for Arinsu the entire time. Halfway through the night, they are confronted by a Minotaur who wants to eat them. Glorio says that he can handle it, but Goku says it might be too much for him. This remark, which bruises Glorio's ego, causes him to ask Goku if he thinks he's actually that much stronger than him. From which Goku responds with, well, not to brag or anything, but yeah. This prompts Glorio to challenge Goku to a spar. Goku reluctantly agrees and fights Glorio. Shin sees this as an opportunity to see what Glorio is about and reveal his powers. Goku and Glorio then fight, with Glorio revealing his lightning powers and Goku formally using Super Saiyan for the first time, and he ends up effortlessly defeating Glorio. This episode ends with our earthly gang as Bulma finishes building the plane to the Demon Realm. However, her plane unfortunately breaks down, bringing us to the conclusion of episode 6. For the pros of this episode, I want to start with some based character interactions. I think Glorio and Pansy's dynamic is rather cute, as Glorio is this broody guy, and Pansy sort of just sees right through it. In a way, it's telling the viewer like, hey man, we're here to have fun, it ain't that deep. In a similar vein, I love Goku's hyping up of Shin. I didn't mention it in the summary, but there's a moment in this episode where Goku says, yeah, we have a bunch of gods, and this guy right here, yeah, he's the best one. It does some characterization of the two and depicts them as bros who actually like each other, as compared to another interaction between the two in another Dragon Ball series where Goku kind of just makes fun of his incompetence. On the more comical side, I love this Minotaur, and the brief adventure with this guy and Goku's interaction with him is very OG Dragon Ball. Like, beat for beat, I can see 12-year-old Goku talking to a man-eating monster like this verbatim, which once again supports the idea that they're characterizing Goku as a bit more juvenile, but a way that's still true to his character. The final character action I want to give praise to is Glorio's reaction to losing. He doesn't stay on the issue, nor does he throw a fit. He just accepts the fact that he's weaker than Goku, and he's not passing that wall anytime soon. While we're talking about the narrative beats, Glorio working for Arinsu is a cool twist that I'm glad they didn't commit to. And by that, I mean I'm glad that the viewer finds this out early on in the series as compared to the episode our characters find out, which is the second to last. The story is showing its cards, and now the mystery isn't what Glorio is up to, rather, what's Arinsu's plan, and then when are Goku and the gang going to confront Glorio on this? It may be personal preference, but I much prefer this as compared to no suspicion of Glorio for the sake of a plot twist right at the end, as this way allows tension and mystery to build up throughout the story. To end off on this topic for now, a really cool piece of visual storytelling is when Shin is explaining the lore behind Arinsu, the episode shows us a shot of Glorio, which is subtle and a clever nod to the twist of the episode. Okay, now let's talk about it. Glorio vs. Goku is a peak fight and is the first headliner battle of the series thus far. I don't know what you guys want me to say about it. Glorio's moveset is beautifully animated, and in a series where lightning is shown all the time with the Super Saiyan transformations, Daima understood how to give Glorio an ability and depict it in a manner that's new and refreshing. This is also the formal debut of Mini Super Saiyan, and I gotta admit, it looks awesome. The modest way Goku finishes this fight is another glimpse of how fights in Shonen can be used as methods of storytelling. Seeing Goku being confronted by the guy who's probably the strongest he's fought upon entering the Demon Realm, just to end the fight by exerting a minimal amount of effort, shows that Goku trusts Glorio and knows not to hurt him. But it also displays supreme control over the usage of his energy and movements, something conveyed to the viewer without words, just visuals. Overall, an awesome fight that can be enjoyed by any Dragon Ball fan. Once again, we have another episode where I don't have that many bad things to say. If I had to choose some nitpicks, I would point out that there seems to be some artificial conflict with the planes getting broken and stunting the progression of the plot, but it seems in this instance it was supposed to be the previous episode's cliffhanger that this episode didn't really commit to. I could also see some folks getting upset at this episode as it could be interpreted as quite filler-y, but even without the cool fight at the end, we do get some cool world building and story drops with the three Glind and their origin. The final score for this one is an 8.5 out of 10. Now, for the first time since episode 2, our story starts on the lookout where Bulma is trying to find out what's wrong with the plane. She's upset because it seems that to make the plane fly, she would have to get an element that's just not present on Earth. Well, she's in luck as our goat, Charlie Dompler, arrives at the lookout saying that he was sent by King Kadan to pick up Vegeta, Bulma, and Piccolo and unite with our gang in the Demon Realm. Kibito decides to stay behind and look after the lookout as our second group of protagonists are on their way to meet the first. Meanwhile, in the Demon Realm, PGGS are tagged by the Gendarmerie, who demand to search their vehicle on their search for Goku. They manage to find them due to Pansy's collar, which got scanned in the last episode. The plane gets searched, and Goku manages to get out by instant transmissioning behind Shin. The Gendarmerie are getting ready to leave, but they then decide to question Pansy because of the attack back in episode 4. This causes Pansy to freak out, which leads to an action sequence where Shin and Glorio need to fight against the Gendarmerie, with Goku only intervening at the end to take out the last ship. What follows is a really cool scene where Shin and Pansy figure out that the collar is made of Ketchunite and was made by Arinsu. And if a Glind can make them, they can break them, as Shin removes Pansy's collar. This is a cool moment for the two characters that culminates in Pansy asking him his name. He responds with Shin, but we learn that he actually has a demon realm name, and that it is Nahare. Goku says that he'll start calling him that before quickly dropping it. While the plane they were rocking gets damaged in the flight, they do manage to find a gendarmerie plane to take it to the destination of Tamagami 3. Now that they have a new plane, there are pin number concerns, so Pansy gets a pal to get a new one for them. This pal tells him that Vegeta and Co are on their way. After this, our gang finally meets Tamagami 3, arriving in the nearby town, and they have an interaction with the barkeep who's surprised to see that Goku wants to fight it. Our episode ending with Goku formally challenging Tamagami number 3. Starting with the pros of this episode, once again, Goku and Shin's relationship in this show is based. They're pals who understand each other, and Shin's line of, he's a little different like that, is not only funny, but a wholesome way to reflect this. Also, Ibis is still really funny. I love this awkward guy who's out there out of obligation and isn't really afraid to hide that. I'm also a fan of the bar interactions at the end of the episode, where the barkeep applauds our group for stealing a plane from the oppressive police force. Finally, the show does a good job at hyping up the Tamagamis as something that should be praised. They're a threat that's been built up with pure lore and world building, which has managed to build up hype for this confrontation. If you ask me, it's a textbook example of how narrative beats in standard storytelling can contribute to the effectiveness/enjoyability of a fight. Even though I don't have much to say about this one in the pros, it's still really good. And as for the cons, we need to address the elephant in the room. That being, Goku's self-proclamation that he wasn't really involved in raising Gohan and Goten. This is probably the only misstep of Goku's characterization in Daima. And I'm serious. I think if fans are frustrated with this, that is totally understandable, and I'm not going to be tight if someone doesn't want to shake this critique. But I do think there's a charitable interpretation of this line that aligns with Goku's previous characterization and just the matter of facts of his life. With Gohan, we can say that Goku meant he didn't raise him in terms of teaching him mannerisms and etiquette, as Goku is seen as having the provider role in terms of food and protection, which means that Chi-Chi would have taught him this stuff. Even then, if we look at Goten, this line makes a lot more sense when we consider when in the Dragon Ball timeline this takes place. The Buu Saga ended a few months ago, which means that Goku and Goten just met. A fact which is the case because he was dead for 7 years. A death he incurred to protect his son. It's not that far of a stretch to say that Goku would have this perception of himself, but that doesn't necessarily mean he thinks, nor is he actually a bad dad. That being said, the delivery in the episode probably could have been better. Okay, so with that rant out of the way, my initial con list had 2 more things that I think might actually be non-issues. The first is Peril, who is Pansy's guy in the chair who comes out of literally nowhere. From what I remember at the time of writing, this guy isn't going to do much else, so it kind of begs the question of why would you introduce a new named character who doesn't do anything? And finally, I wrote down, why couldn't Goku just instant transmission to the Tamagami? This is because Goku mentions that it seems pretty strong. In fact, I think in episode 16, whenever he meets the first Tamagami, he implies that Tamagami 1 is the strongest of the 3. And if this means that the Tamagamis have ki, then Goku probably could have just instant transmission from the very beginning. But it's also possible Goku is doing a pure aura read here, and that Tamagami 3 does not have ki like some of the other artificial beings, so this could just be a non-issue. I'm giving this episode another 7.5 out of 10, continuing the trend of good characterization and a nice build-up for the climactic battle of Episode 8. Here it is. Episode 8. This is the fight for the first Dragon Ball, and my god, is it epic. Here, Goku fights Tamagami 3 in his base form before getting pushed to Super Saiyan. This is one of the rare fights in Dragon Ball where we see weapons versus weapons. After Goku goes Super Saiyan, he starts to overwhelm the Tamagami. Fired up and overheating, the Tamagami fires a huge energy beam at Goku that our Saiyan decides to combat with the debut of the Kamehameha. After an awesome beam struggle, Goku seemingly goes Super Saiyan 2 and forces the Tamagami to give up. But our Saiyan's trial isn't over yet. To get the Dragon Ball, he must pass a mental trial/puzzle. The Tamagami does a funny ball in the cup thing and tries to trick Goku, but Goku manages to see it get tossed away, and the Dragon Ball is now in the possession of our heroes. After this, Glorio takes a call with Arinsu and updates her on their status. The rest of the episode is mostly about the antagonists. Goma and Degasu find out that Arinsu went after Babidi and Deborah to get samples of Majin Buu. And we quickly find out that this is because Arinsu is plotting to make another Majin. We then get introduced to a pretty big lore character, Mabra, who is actually the rightful creator of Majin Buu. This is delivered in a pretty funny way as Arinsu jokes about how Mabra made one of the biggest genociders in the Dragon Ball verse. After some cool magic stuff, Arinsu shares that her goal is to become the Supreme Demon King, and that to do so she'll have to have the Dragon Balls on her side. Mabra is shocked by this, but Arinsu tells her that she has her own pawns already in play, and that she already has one of the 3 balls. Our episode ends with Vegeta and Co. making their way to Goku and friends, and then King Kadon calls Hybis and tells him to meet up with Pansy and the others at Warp Sama. Alright guys, this is the best episode so far by far. Everything about Goku vs. Tamagami 3 is peak. Everyone knows that everything about the fight is goated, but to talk about something that I think some people might not have mentioned, the lighting in this fight is really well done. The overarching sunset sets the stage nicely, and watching it change with the beam struggles and the powering up of our characters makes it super dynamic. This fight also has some awesome usage of the environment, with Goku running on walls and looking for opportunities to close the distance, that's topped off with the best animation sequence in the show so far. Something else I love from this fight is how expressive Tamagami 3 is. Seeing his face and body contort as Goku gut punches him is a wonderful example of how to utilize art and expressions to reflect power. Goku is so strong that he made a robot retch in pain. It's just really cool. Speaking of really cool, the final battle is a fun detail that Neva would totally throw in there just to screw over brutes who are power hungry for the Dragon Balls. The whole fight here is just a sweet juxtaposition of the peak titanic clashes of Dragon Ball Z and the funny antics of the original series. A+ fight scene, no notes. Back to the more lighthearted stuff that I really like, Goku becomes a folk hero of the 3rd Demon World, which not only makes the environment feel more lived in, but it also displays the based impact our heroes are having by going throughout their adventures. More minor stuff that made me smile was Tamagami 3 practicing the Kamehameha. This was really cute. Also, Charlie Doppler is still really funny, and seeing him put Mini Vegeta in his place is fun. And finally, there's the based Majin lore. Once again, Mabra is another character introduced that brings layers of lore and mystique to the Demon Realm and the creation of Majin Buu. Getting context on Buu's creation is not something we necessarily needed, but it's welcome. What we get doesn't take away from Buu's chaotic nature, and Mabra being the true creator of Buu tracks perfectly with the cowardice of Bibbidi and Bobbidi. For cons in this one, I got nothing. 9 out of 10, epic episode. But before we move on to episode 9, let's talk about some general plot threads and overarching story structures that's been up so far. At this point in Daima, it's clear that there are 3 different plot threads that are being set up and executed. There's the A-plot of Goku and his friends trying to collect the Dragon Balls, and at this moment, this plot is split into 2, with Goku, Pansy, Glorio, and Shin, and then Vegeta, Bulma, Piccolo, and Hybis. There's the B-plot of Goma and Degasu, who turned Goku and Co. into their mini versions, who are now trying to figure out what to do next, and the C-plot of Arinsu's plans to usurp Goma and her hiring of Glorio. These stories have been meticulously planned throughout the entire series thus far, and seeing the antics and plots unfold is reminiscent of the overlapping plots and mysteries present in stories like the Cell Saga and the Namek Saga. The point of this mini rant is that, in terms of plot structure, Daima feels very Dragon Ball, and the way these threads are constructed leaves the viewer wondering, when is all this going to culminate and be paid off? An effective form of storytelling as it keeps the viewer coming back for more episodes. Alright, on to episode 9. So upon my initial rewatch of episode 9, I wanted to call it a filler episode, but I think this is just categorically untrue. Like, it doesn't have the peak hype of episode 8, but to say that this episode is filler-y, or that nothing happens in it, is just false. So with the first Dragon Ball collected, Goku, Shin, Glorio, and Pansy go to stay at a hotel for the night at Pansy's request. Glorio covers for everything, which makes Shin question where Glorio is getting his money from, and he finds out that it is not from King Kadon. They need to stay inconspicuous, so Goku wears a funny hat. Although this is the case, some thugs find out that they're the ones with the Dragon Ball and try to steal it from them. They initially succeed, but Pansy put a tracker on the ball, which led to the bandits getting pursued by both Goku and Glorio. Glorio praises Pansy for her foresight to put a tracker on the ball. We learn that Vegeta and Co. are going to meet up with them soon, but some stuff happened where their plane got stolen. Funnily enough, Vegeta, Piccolo, Bulma, and Hybis go through pretty much the same motions Shin, Goku, and Glorio did in episode 3. Vegeta beat up some guys at a bar, which led to them stealing their plane. To rub salt in the wound, Goku and gang shows up, finally reuniting with their friends, just for Goku to say, yeah, sorry, we don't have any room, so we're just going to leave you guys here. While on this set, there's a peculiar interaction with Hybis where Bulma calls out the fact that there is a moving, living eyeball on his belt. Some point during this time, Degasu and Goma find out that the Z-Fighters have a Dragon Ball and start freaking out. Our episode ends with Arinsu and Mabra actually making the new Majin. With a sample of Arinsu's spit and Saibamen seeds, we see the birth of a new Majin, Majin Ku, whose first task is to defeat Tamagami 1. For pros of this one, Goku is still peak. This is also the first episode where we see the effects he's had on the Demon Realm population. I want to go more in depth in this later in the video, but for now, just know that I love this, and the natural buildup of it is quite nice. This episode also gave us an interesting aerial battle that was more than just characters levitating above the ground. It might be redundant or weird to say, but having a fight where characters feel like they're flying is something I think modern Dragon Ball, or even certain moments of Z, seem to have lost. Speaking of cool visuals, Glorio's lightning literally never gets old, and it's still beautiful to look at, and Goma is still just as expressive as always, which is peak. This episode also offers some of the best gags we've seen so far. Goku's encounter with the thieves and their reaction to him essentially materializing up there made me laugh even on rewatch. Mini Vegeta in a nightclub is a goofy visual gag, and Hybis eating a bag of chips while Vegeta took care of the bandits continues to show how goated he is. Seeing Goku leave Vegeta, Piccolo, and Bulma behind just for Piccolo to say, hey, couldn't we have brought Kibito, was a really funny interaction and once again displayed how true these characters are to their characterization in the original series. I would say how true they are to their original counterparts, but the point is that Daima makes you feel like these are the original counterparts. I know a lot of my commentary on this episode has been, oh, they look cool, or that was funny, but if there was anything else to say, I would tell you guys. As for more base characterization, I feel like this episode is the first that displays why Goku and Shin were separated from Vegeta and Piccolo in the beginning of the show. Isolating Goku, Shin, Glorio, and Pansy from the rest of the Z Fighters gives the series time to fully flesh out and explore these characters and allows the viewer to see their relationships blossom. The line where Glorio commends Pansy for her work after they get the Dragon Ball is a wholesome full circle moment that shows how much he's come to care about her since they met in episode 4. Moments like this work best if there's genuine build-up to this, and I think separating the cast is what allowed this to work. Because the amount of main character interaction so far has been limited to Shin, Goku, Glorio, and Pansy, their friendships with each other and care for one another seems more real as compared to if half of Daima was just watching Vegeta and Goku bicker about what to do at any given moment. Something I want to drive home here is that there are more moments like this throughout Daima, but I might spare going over them until I'm in the overarching parts of this video. Back to episode 9 stuff, let's talk about the big guy, Ku. Now, I'm sure some of you guys thought that Ku was getting saved for the cons section, but nope. I like Majin Ku. The way his creation ties into other elements from the Dragon Ball series makes the verse feel rather connected, and it successfully explores elements of the series that were rather untouched or forgotten once they were used. As for his design, it's pretty Dragon Ball. That's all I gotta say about it. I know a lot of folks were upset he didn't look super buff and overpowered, but we have to remember how goofy the original forms of Buu look, and I think Ku is right at home with those. But that's all I'll say about him for now. Final notes on this episode. This episode shows how much prowess Daima has, even when it's on cooldown and not doing ultra hype fight episodes. Episode 9 is goofy, fun, and full of heart. 8 out of 10. Episode 10 jumps back and forth between two plots. There's Ku versus Tamagami 1, and there's what our pro tags are up to. For now, I'll focus on the latter and revisit the Ku stuff to maintain a nice flow for this segment. So the gang end up in the second demon realm, which is covered in ocean. They get attacked by the gendarmerie, who are then stopped by Goku. During this encounter, they then get attacked by a kraken, which is pretty much exactly what you're thinking, but they're freaking giant. Their ship gets eaten, but Pansy decides to jump back for it. Right before she gets crushed, she is saved by Goku. Pansy says that she went back to get the Dragon Ball. We see that now our gang is forced to wait for Vegeta and company, and that they actually wait on the original Namekian planet. We see that Degasu and Goma pretty much watch that whole encounter, worried that they're still heading towards them. After Vegeta and Co join the second demon realm, Goku instant transmissions to them, and our gang is finally reunited. After settling on original Namek, we actually get a pretty massive lore dump for the Dragon Ball cosmology that tells us that all the life in the Dragon Ball verse originated from the demon realm, and that Glins were set up to be the gods of creation of various universes. This expo dump from Shin has a brief cameo from the other Kaioshins who made their debut in Dragon Ball Super. After this lore dump, they decided to leave for Tamagami 2, and we learned that none other than Neva was following close behind our heroes. As for the other story here, Majin Ku fights Tamagami 1. We see that Ku has a bizarre fighting style which aligns with Buu. He does a cool tornado attack, he makes funny faces, and he pounces on all fours, but he ultimately fails to defeat his robotic opponent. Disappointed in him, Orinsu and Ku leave the first Tamagami. A lot of the pros of episode 10 follow much of the other pros of the series. Like the first I have listed is the foreshadowing of Glorio's backing of Goku to go for the Dragon Balls. It's a subtle reminder that Glorio is plotting something. Also, I love Hybis, and seeing him try to pick up Bulma and make fun of Vegeta is still funny. Seeing Vegeta flustered is goofy, and I like that he has these goofy moments as a character. Also, Goku and Shin, man. Goku offering to stop by Shin's homeworld once again shows how much of bros they are. Like, these guys are bro goals. Another continuing pro of the series is the facial expressions were particularly on point of this episode. A lot of them were surprise reactions to plot stuff, but they're still pretty nice to see. Speaking of surprising plot stuff, giant monsters like this being present in Dragon Ball feels like a return to the original series' fantasy roots, and I must say, it's welcome. We also get some peak Frieza flashbacks. As for the Ku stuff, it's fun. Seeing Ku not be a malicious demon is a nice subversion from the original Buu. He really does come across as a more stable version of Buu, while still having that crazed Majin nature. I'm also a fan of his innocent demeanor towards the end of the episode, with him telling Arinsu that he can run errands for her, and that he can sing really well. The biggest thing to come from this episode was the huge lore dump regarding the Dragon Ball cosmology. How did I feel about it? I think it's pretty tight. It continues the Daima trend of fleshing out what's already there. I know a lot of fans think that this scene is indicating that Super and Daima are set in the same continuity, but I don't think this is the case. I want to save this topic for its own video, but just know that I don't think it's a sin to reuse these characters introduced from Super, and this lore dump does give us the earliest definitive start of the Dragon Ball mythos, which is pretty cool. It also doesn't contradict anything explored in Super or GT as far as I know, which means that Daima's origin point could apply to most of the other Dragon Ball continuities. The original designs that do pop up align with the characterization of the Demon Realm and the Demon Kings thus far. Giving this one another 8 out of 10. We got some cool lore, a cool fight, and our gang is finally reunited with each other, marking a solid halfway point for the series. Episode 11 starts off with a pretty big reveal that Neva was faking his senility to trick Goma and Degasu. He formally meets the Z-Fighters and tries fooling them as well, but Piccolo sees right through it. Pansy quickly finds out that Neva made the Tamagamis, and Neva convinces our gang to let him join the adventuring party. Meanwhile, back at the lab, Mabra and Arinsu attempt to create another Majin with more of Buu's essence. The two understand that this one is going to be riskier than the creation of Ku. We get some more Namekian lore, with Neva explaining that he decided to stay on the original planet to keep it safe for when his brethren return. Vegeta then explains that he will be the one to fight Tamagami 2, as Goku fought the first. Neva is taken aback by the Saiyan's eagerness to fight the artificial life form. Back to our C-plot, Mabra and Arinsu make Majin Du, who looks more similar to Fat Buu, and holy shit, is that a Dr. Slump reference? Unlike Ku, Du has Buu's love of chocolate and seems to be a more immature character akin to his father. Similar to Ku though, Du's first assignment is to fight Tamagami 1. Du starts the fight and it becomes clear that they're giving him more Buuisms than Ku. Meanwhile, our pro-tags make it to Tamagami 2. Vegeta starts the fight, their terrain being over the vast ocean of the second demon world. This is where most of the episode's budget went, as this preliminary start to the fight is pretty awesome. Our episode then ends with Vegeta transforming into Water Vegeta and seemingly getting eaten by a Kraken. I think the point of episode 11 was to build up the fight of the second Tamagami and continue to give much needed characterization to Daima's original characters. Arinsu, Du, and Ku are a wholesome trio, and seeing Ku be like, "Yeah, I always wanted a brother," is not only funny given that he's been alive for a few hours, but it's really cute and plays into his innocent demeanor. Seeing the witches forcibly ninja and then look in horror as their two homunculoids fight like children humanizes them as they realize they may be in over their heads. Similar to Ku, I really like Majin Du. He's more Buu-esque and they keep a lot of the Buuisms in him, which tracks given that his creation utilized more of Buu's essence. Du also brings the return of Buu's mimicry ability as he learns to fire ki blasts after watching Tamagami 1 do it. This is something that gets a pretty sick payoff later on. Most of the world building of this episode is pretty peak. The way Neva describes the usage of the Demon Realm Dragon Balls is reminiscent of how the Namekian Dragon Balls are portrayed in Z. I also want to highlight the interaction between Tamagami 2 and Neva. The way the Tamagami immediately takes Vegeta seriously upon seeing his creator shows the reverence they have for him, which hypes up Neva as this mythical being. It's a rather subtle way to deliver this, but it's effective. Speaking of subtle but effective, Neva convinces our adventuring party to let him join by pointing out how none of them speak Namekian. And when this happens, it zooms in on Glorio, which is amazing foreshadowing that I did not catch on my first watch. Finally, I don't really know where to throw this in on this list, but there's a based gag where Neva says Namekians shouldn't use their powers for conflict, and everyone just turns at Piccolo, even Vegeta, which I once again think is really funny. Good episode. But I finally have a tangible complaint. You know how I said most of the world building is pretty peak? There is one detail that I think I could have gone without, that being Piccolo knowing his father. Hey guys, this is Editing Tough Man here. So I wrote and recorded this bit probably like 2 months ago now, and I go on this whole rant about how Piccolo knowing of his dad, it kind of ruins the mystique of Piccolo that was hyped up in Dragon Ball Z, and I think it's a really weird choice for Daima to make for Piccolo to know this guy. However, upon looking into it while editing, I realized, no, this just isn't the case, as Piccolo's dad is talked about a couple of times in Dragon Ball Z. The first is the mention of Kami's origin of when he comes to Earth. Mr. Popo explains how Kami's parents are, like, they left Kami on Earth, and they promised they would come back for him, but then they never do. And the second time is when Krillin is talking to Guru, and Guru explains how Cadets sent his son, a baby Namekian, to Earth, and then that's the origin of Kami, right? So, I initially thought this was weird because, ruining the mystique. I think like the mysteriousnness of the nameless Namekian is really cool, and kind of Piccolo knowing his origin kind of ruins that mystique in my opinion. But Cadets being something from Z that Piccolo then knows about, I don't know. I wouldn't fault Daima for that. If I still think this is a legitimate critique, which I really don't think it is, then if anything, it would be the fault of Z. And Daima is more so highlighting this very obscure fact that is present in Dragon Ball Z, which I gotta say is just another plus of the show. Along with this is the confirmation that Cadets is specifically Kami's father, or I guess you could say the father of the nameless Namekian, and not Piccolo. So, just an interesting lore bit there. Sorry for not catching this on the original scripting. I'm a Dragon Ball fan. I don't know how to read, but I hope you're enjoying the video so far. Thank you. Despite that, still a good episode, and I'm going to give it another 8 out of 10. True Strength has the daunting task of wrapping up 2 Tamagami fights. And to be blunt, it passes this test with flying colors. So it turns out Vegeta did not get eaten and reveals that he is still not used to being a child. But Tamagami 2 presses Vegeta and he ends up getting eaten by a Kraken for real this time. And there's this really cool scene where he goes Super Saiyan 2 to escape its maw. Just like Goku vs. Tamagami 3, this episode is very pretty with the lighting and the contrast of the environments. Back at Goma's palace, Do is fighting Tamagami 1, which is an interesting fight that involves a lot of lollygagging. Ku, Arinsu, and the Tamagami are trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Neva sees that Vegeta is taking on Tamagami 2 a bit too easily, so he decides to claim his spot as the funniest character in the show, and he buffs it. The halfway point of this episode shows Do and Vegeta getting their asses kicked by the Tamagamis. Do is losing because he's throwing a tantrum and he wants chocolate, while Vegeta is losing due to his newly buffed opponent. The GOAT, Majin Ku, runs out and gives his brother a chocolate, which allows Do to kick ass and then actually defeat Tamagami 1. Similar to Goku's trial, Do has to go through a brain challenge, which is solved by Ku. Degasu and Goma are interjected throughout this episode, reacting to the 2 fights. After Do gets his Dragon Ball, we focus on Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta, who gets overwhelmed. And it seems like he's down for the count, but then he does the thing. With Vegeta submerged, overwhelmed, and knocked back into his base form, he realizes that he has to take it a step further, as he transforms back to Super Saiyan, erupts from the water, and after a few seconds of screaming, finally ascends to the current pinnacle of power, Super Saiyan 3. Seeing Goku surprised by this development, Bulma tells Sun-kun that Vegeta has actually been training by himself for quite a while to learn the form. The rest of the fight is brief as Ultra Water Vegeta 1 dominates the Tamagami in a very Vegeta fashion, styling on it and finishing it off with a Gallic gun and blasting through some planets. Vegeta's trial is a math story problem that he manages to beat with the street smarts as, everyone knows snakes don't eat biscuits. Our adventuring party now has their second Dragon Ball as they begin to make their way for the first Demon World. Okay, so everything I said about Episode 8 applies here. I could repeat myself for a couple minutes, but we all know there'd be no point. This episode is beautiful, the fights are fun, the Tamagamis are awesome, the brain challenges are aligned with Episode 8, Do fights just like Boo, and Vegeta goes Super Saiyan 3. This is a huge moment for the Dragon Ball franchise, and the execution of it is damn near perfect. My favorite thing about it is how they slightly changed the hair design from Goku's. Of course, he has the iconic widow's peak, but the sharpness of his hair contrasts nicely with how Goku's mane flows in the wind. As for the plot of this episode, I'm still a fan of Neva and the Tamagami trials. In my notes, I wrote down that Goku and Vegeta are apes, which I think is a reference to how dumb they are with how much they struggle with the math problem. The scene after Vegeta solves the problem stands as a great representation of how Daima perfectly presents and adds to the Dragon Ball cast. Neva thanking the Tamagamis adds to what I said the last episode, and seeing Hybisa's victory dance allowed him to reclaim his spot as the funniest character. Vegeta also says he's more civilized and cultured while talking to Goku, which is a very goofy moment and acknowledges something I really didn't think Dragon Ball would ever call back to, which is the fact that Vegeta used to just, eat sentient species. For cons, I got nothing. This is the next big hype episode and delivered something Dragon Ball fans have been waiting for literal decades. Our second 9 out of 10 and tied for the top so far. Episode 13 is to episode 12 what episode 9 was to episode 8. Which means it's a cooldown from the peak hype that came before it. This episode starts with Goma disabling Warp Sama so our gang can't reach the first demon realm. Back in the second, our protag ships breaks down again. Vegeta pulls a Jotaro as they all hop out of the plane and realize they're in a big forest made of grass. For the first time in the series, Neva gets worried and says that they gotta leave soon because they're on the planet of the Mega. Megath are giant people who are so formidable and large that the Supreme Demon King and the Gendarmerie don't enter their terrain. Glorio updates Arinsu on the Dragon Ball status, and Pansy and Bulma have a bonding moment where they are fixing the plane. Things are all happy and good for our heroes, but a monster approacheth, attacking Goku from within the grass. The creature that attacks Goku is actually a hamster, one so large that it's almost as big as their plane. Our adventuring party then survives a hamster onslaught as the rodents mischievously attempt to chip away at them and their plane, but then run away as a Megath approaches. Megaths are so large that a child's toe dwarfs our protagonists. The child is on his way home from school and sits down on a stump to eat, which is all fine and good, but he has a dog who ends up finding the Z-Fighters and starts quote-unquote attacking them. And that's, attacking in quotes because it's just a dog that's trying to play. There's a moment where Vegeta saves Glorio and Goku ends up on the dog's coat and encounters a giant flea. Soon, the child encounters them and pokes the plane like it's a bug, but shortly after this, Bulma and Pansy get the plane working and our party manages to escape. So, for whatever reason, I loved this episode. The scene where Degusu disables Warp Sama has this visual gag where the room it gets disabled in looks technicolored and complicated, just for it to be a simple lever that needs to be flipped. Pansy and Bulma's interaction was exactly what I was talking about in regard to the decision to split the cast. The fact that the viewer knows Pansy as a character makes this interaction mean more as compared to if it wasn't the case. And then, I just loved this episode on a conceptual level. The visuals are foreign and magical. They really remind me of some of the key art featured in Dan Dan Kokoro Hikaru Teku, which, for those who don't know, is the main intro of Dragon Ball GT. Specific visual highlights involve the POV shot of Goku getting attacked by the hamsters and the ways in which the Megath are animated. Their size and might can be felt from the sheer scale and perspective they decide to use to portray these beings, which is paired nicely with the world building here. For example, the Megath eat Krakens as snacks. Yeah, the beings that struck fear into Goku and Vegeta due to their sheer scale are now literally snack food for these Nephilim. What a just brilliant way to up the fantastical and terrifying nature of the Demon Realm. And then, the Dragon Ball antics of this episode are tied in the greatest bow ever, with Navel revealing that there are beings even bigger than the Megaths, and then Goku looking in awe and wonder at the world in front of him. It's just magical. As I said earlier, this is what episode 9 is to episode 8, a cooldown episode from the hype that came before it, but it's still incredibly fun and gives us some sick lore to the series, and I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10. Taboo is our next episode. It opens with Glorio and Pansy. Pansy calls her friend Peril and explains to her that King Kadon ended up stealing a plane to meet them in the first Demon World. Meanwhile, back in the first Demon World, Degusu shows Goma that he called up the Gendarmerie Special Forces, who are supposed to take care of the Z-Fighters. Their crew consists of, this is my first time ever pronouncing their names, Kadam, Daima, Helia, Mashin, and Gyomoy. Literally one look at these guys will tell you that they're clearly an homage to the Ginyu Force. Back in the second Demon World, the Z-Fighters come across the disabled Warp Sama. Goku tries to touch the shield that leads down into the first world with the power pole, and he gets zapped like a fly, and is knocked unconscious, and he starts to descend downward. Neva then reaffirms his GOAT status and disables the shield, not only saving Goku, but allowing them to fly down to the first Demon World. A really cool detail is that back in the first Demon World, Degusu and Arinsu can feel a change in the atmosphere of their realm, now that the hole is blown open. What follows is a cute scene where Do/Ku meet the Not Ginyu Force in a convenience store. The Special Force offers to buy them a bunch of snacks, but just gives them 2 chocolate bars because they're stupid and didn't realize they were out of money. We then cut to our protags who are falling into the first world. They abandon their plane as it can't handle the change in atmospheric pressure. And after landing in the first demon world, our adventuring party is fired up and our episode then ends. This episode introduces the Not Ginyu Force, and soon I will be talking about them in a negative light, but at the very beginning they at least commit to the bit, and some of their antics are pretty funny. Seeing Goma being sick of their shit right off the bat gives them more characters to play off of, which is nice. Onto the GOAT, Neva just doing something like randomly opening the shield can be a criticism of the show, but I think it works considering that A, he's Namekian, B, he's been doing shit like this since the first episode, and C, Neva's status as a legendary/mythical warrior is brought up throughout almost all of his encounters. Point is, it makes sense that he's able to do magical reality warping shenanigans like this, and also not to mention the fact that he's the one who put the shields in the first place. And finally, once the shield is broken, there's a cute moment where our adventuring party throws their fists in the air and they cheer as they do a rallying call. The best part is that the fists we see are Goku's and then all of the original characters introduced in Daima with the exception of Gloria, displaying how close these characters have become before their final confrontation. As for the cons, the pacing and presentation of this episode are much slower than the ones beforehand. And for a quick note on the Special Gendarmerie Force, I don't mind them conceptually, but the show probably spends too much time on them here. So, I'll be blunt, Taboo marks the beginning of a slight lull in Daima's quality. There is still a lot of good in this and the upcoming episodes, as most of it does just boil down to pacing as compared to story stuff, but this is a problem nonetheless. And this one's getting a 7 out of 10. Episode 15, Third Eye, picks up with Goma executing a full-on attack on the Z-Fighters. Goku and Vegeta get incapacitated at some point as they are zapped with some powerful weapons. Goma and Degasu check out the Z-Fighters and find that Hibis is wearing the third eye on his belt. This shocks the two of them, and Goma commands Degasu to go find out how to get it. After this, there's a cool narrated scene that explains the history of the third eye. We see some silhouettes of the Demon Kings before, and holy shit, is that Demigra? We learn that Deborah pretty much usurped his father and had a goon hide the third eye, but the goon then dies due to the rough nature of the third demon world, and it gets lost, where Hibis just ends up finding it and sticking it onto his belt. Back to the war zone, our heroes are hiding behind a wall where Goku asks Neva to help them out, but he declines. Hibis, in the midst of all this, gets approached by a lady wearing a funny hat, and holy shit, is that Toa? So Toa manages to get Hibis' belt and is now on the lookout for Degasu. We see that Rinsu is still plotting and seemingly plans to take advantage of the chaos. Vegeta, Piccolo, and Goku almost get taken out by tanks, but King Kadan comes in for the save, and this is the main action piece of this episode, and after the Gendarmerie are taken care of, the episode ends. As for the pros of this one, more Deborah lore is based and is always based, and getting a concise history of the Magic Eye is something that's welcome. Deborah's decision to usurp his father explores him as a character and aligns with his motivations for his actions in the Buu Saga. As for some character stuff, Hibis is awesome, and I love literally every single one of his interactions. And then we cut to Rinsu, where we see that Ku and Du are sleeping, and the way these two are depicted is just so wholesome. Seeing King Kadan return like this was fun and a nice payoff to episode 4. What helps is that we knew the king was going to return in some fashion, in some way, at some point throughout the show's finale, so it's not like this blindsided the viewer at all. After the shortest prose section, let's get into the issues of this one. This episode is really slow, like the worst pacing so far. The action scenes that are featured here don't effectively pad the time, as a lot of it is just blue lasers firing at the adventuring party for like 15 minutes. While I do think a concept like this could have worked for Dragon Ball, the execution is too repetitive. Also, let's talk about the obvious. This entire conflict, like the entire conflict of this episode, can be resolved in like 2 seconds if Vegeta and Goku just transformed. And I'm not trying to do like the whole power scaling thing where we just ruin the narrative, but it's like Goku transforms at the end of the episode and clears a wave of soldiers, so why didn't he nor Vegeta just do it sooner? The typical save here is that they don't want to waste a lot of energy, but Goku literally still has the revive bugs. And then all in all, for the first time in the series, the plot and conflicts of an episode feel artificial in a way that borderline contradicts the series for the sake of there being a conflict. And that is something that deserves to be critiqued, and this better help me beat the glazing allegations in the comments. For my final rating, I'm giving it a 6.5 out of 10. I do think this is the new weakest episode of the show. What I just described is a noticeable writing error, but the episode is still beautiful, the show has its charm, and there's a lot of lore going on here that effectively drives the plot and adds on to the original series. So with that, on to the next one. So Hibis has a new cool hat, and then after defeating the foot soldiers, the gang decide that it's finally time to go save Dende. Seeing the writing on the wall, Degasu takes Dende to do something drastic. Before entering Goma's castle, the gang are stopped by the Not Ginyu Force, but they are taken care of by Vegeta. Meanwhile, Not Toa is looking for Degasu to deliver the belt. Our protagonists decide to split up to find Dende, with Piccolo, Shin, Goku, and Vegeta going through the castle with the rest of our party hanging out. However, Pansy and Glorio quickly decide to follow the quartet. After exploring the castle for a bit, they find Dende, and Degasu points a gun at a baby. What? Okay. So, Shin tries to talk down his brother, who is now not Zamasu. Dende is then saved with the combined efforts of Pansy, Glorio, and Hibis. With Dende safe and Degasu captured, our gang goes to confront Tamagami 1, and we finally get the convergence of the A and B plots, with the Rinsu, Ku, and Du confronting the Z Fighters. Our episode ends with Goma getting the eye from Natoa, and he sticks it in his forehead, and he transforms into a buff Dragon Ball Z-esque hulking monster, and holy shit, is that Jiren? I like the ludicrous design of Goma's palace. It feels unnecessarily large, which aligns with the running conflict of how out of touch of a leader Goma is. The cinematography between Degasu and Shin's conversation is rather dynamic and builds tension. On the comedic side of things, Goma running around and freaking out over Degasu's betrayal was goofy, and some of the visual gags with Goma trying to get the eye out of the belt were also pretty funny. As for story stuff, I really liked the decision to have Glorio, Pansy, and Hibis save Dende, with minimal work being done by the OG Z Fighters. This decision plays into the consistent and deliberate plot elements that explore these characters and keep them important to the story. I will bring this moment up later in the video, as I do believe it exemplifies one of the most important themes of Daima. And unfortunately, episode 16 suffers from the same problems as episode 15. Overall, the pacing here screeches to a halt. This is something that I think even the production staff are aware of, as in episode 15 they gave a longer intro than normal, and in episode 16 they gave the full episode 1 introductory scene that involves Bardock and all. The Not Ginyu Force fight scene is extraordinarily slow, to the point that it's borderline distracting. Unlike last episode, Vegeta does clean them up pretty quickly. Also, this time around, the Not Ginyu Force just aren't as funny, until Captain Kadim does fail his big attack and they get tied up. The whole scene is bizarre even down to its presentation. It's to the point that it literally fades to black after they admit defeat, and then they're just tied up. As for other plot stuff, Degasu's turning on Goma is predictable, as it's rather a cliche plot point for the henchman to turn on the ruler, but it's one of the few moments in Daima that isn't really foreshadowed. Like, this is with the exception of Shin's mention of his ambition all the way back in episode 6. I don't think this is as egregious as Goku and Vegeta elongating the conflict of the previous episode, but it's still a criticism that I believe ought to be called out. Given that the episode has the same problem as the last one, I'm going to give it the same score at a 6.5 out of 10. Just how episode 15 gets points for world building, 16 gets points for bringing us to the culmination of these hanging plot threads. But with that, the stage is set and we are ready for Daima's climax. Let's get into episode 17, Goma. Episode 17 is the moment we've all been waiting for. Our gang finally confronts Arinsu. Glorio seems confused by Arinsu's plan and even surprised upon seeing Ku and Du. Shin talks to his sister to see if they can work something out amicably. He even does the funny face he does once he meets the Z Fighters for the first time back in the Buu saga. Arinsu exposits that she wants a stronger and more terrifying demon realm, and she plans to use the Dragon Balls to do so. She proposes that they do a one-on-one where the Z Fighters fight one of her Majin, and the winner would get all the balls. Goku obviously is down for this, and after some bickering with Vegeta, decides that he'll be the one to fight Du. Goku fights Du, and it's pretty rad. It is probably the most serious Goku has been thus far, as he ends up going Super Saiyan almost immediately. This episode displays a more diverse move spread from Du as well. Their fight is interrupted by Not Jiren, who proclaims his existence about halfway through the episode. Bulma points out how the third eye was the one on Hibis' belt, and Hibis manages to write this off. Goma displays his newfound power by almost effortlessly swiping away Mini Vegeta and magically creating the ring for their final showdown. And then for the first time in all of Daima, there is a threat that Goku decides to take fully seriously as he calls for everyone to join the fight. The tension here is built up with Bulma pointing out how unusual it is for Goku to do something like this. While on their way to the arena, Goku ends up dropping the Medibugs he picked up. After seeing Goma's power, Arinsu is convinced that he must be stopped and tells Du and Ku to join the fight. This is echoed by Neva, who tells/commands, it's kind of unclear which, Tamagami 1 to fight as well. After this, we get Dragon Ball Kaisen, and wow. You know, the show up until this point has had no flaws with its animation or hype building, but this sequence is so clean that it deserves to be praised and put on its own pedestal. And this is a common through line we'll see from these last 4 episodes. Our cliffhanger this time around involves Goma charging an attack that takes out the Z Fighters. With Goku almost down for the count, Goma charges a blast directly at him. Our mini Saiyan hillbilly is then saved by the green chubby being of chaos and the magical beetle-like automaton. Deciding he has no choice, Goku, for the first time in the series, gives it his all and goes Super Saiyan 3, marking the end of the preamble and the official start of the final battle. We've reached the hot streak, folks, and spoilers, we're staying here to the very end. Shin's funny face is a cute nostalgic callback that's fun to see. Seeing more of Doo's booisms is a fun delight given how refreshing of a moveset the Majins have. Goku vs. Doo is a really sweet matchup, and the usage of the power pole against such a foe is another addition of the things we haven't seen yet been. The visual of Abura using the magic eye is a beautiful still that visually represents the power of the Tertian Oculus. Moving on to the GOAT, Neva telling Tamagami 1 to go fight Goma is one of the funniest things to happen in the show so far. This MFer is so cheeky and kooky, and I just love him. A controversial take, for reasons we'll soon see, is that I'm a fan of the decision to remove the Medibugs. Getting rid of the revive bugs adds additional stakes for once someone messes up, or if Goma gets someone good, they're out of the fight. No more second chances. And then here we go. The gang jumping Goma is now the best animated sequence in the show up until this point. This is something I can repeat for the next 3 episodes. Goma vs. the Daima cast is the perfect example of how to utilize shonen fights as narrative tools. All of Daima has built up the power of Goku, the Majins, and the Tamagamis. Dragon Ball as a whole is a series which typically goes in for one-on-one grudge matches to decide the fate of the fight, but here, all bets are off. Goma touts himself as an opposing and all-powerful threat as he negs an 8v1. This entire sequence, as well as the rest of the Daima finale, stands as the climactic payoff for the tension and story that's been building and growing for the past 16 episodes. And so far, I'm all here for it. 9 out of 10. Episode 18 starts off with Goku hoping he's not too late, as he's about to set his demon straight. He's Super Saiyan 3 as fuck, man, as he puts the hurt on the Demon King. Doo and Tamagami 1 join back in the fight. While both are getting overpowered by Goma, Ku gets the idea to give his younger brother the means of a power-up. After tossing Doo a chocolate cookie, the chubby green Majin powers up similar to Goku and seemingly unlocks a transformation akin to Super Saiyan 3. But unfortunately for our heroes, the third eye is all-powerful as Tamagami 1, Super Saiyan 3, Doo, and inevitably Goku fall to Goma's might. Goku then gets the shit kicked out of him as he seems down for the count. Goma prepares a wipe attack with the intent of ending them all, but then the old man stands above Goku and charges some sort of magical orb. Upon making contact with Goku, he goes through an ethereal trance state, and then he starts to change. His limbs grow in size, his tail returns, his hair turns a darker hue, and he grows red fur all over his body. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Marking its debut in a Toriyama-written Dragon Ball story, it's Super Saiyan 4. SS4 Mini Goku clears Goma's Death Orb. With everyone wondering what's happened to Goku, he wastes no time as he starts to smoke Goma. Upon seeing Goku continuing his fight, Glorio and the others are inspired to join back as well. Goku does a mighty Kamehameha against Goma, and it seems that he's finally defeated. But the Tertian Oculus is too powerful, as Goma gets big and manages to de-transform Goku. Amidst the chaos, Glorio gets a call by Arinsu. She tells him that it's time to use the Dragon Balls, revealing that Glorio knew Namekian the whole time. Glorio then does what his employer tells him, and we finally see the Demon Realm Dragon, as it's a giant red version of Purunga akin to GT's Ultimate Shenron. Ultimate Purunga, if you will. Goma tries to stop the wish, and holy shit, is that a Heroes reference? Episode 18 ends with Glorio making the wish in Namekian, leaving the viewer wondering what he wished for. While the obvious upshots of this lie in the hype of Super Saiyan 4 and Ultimate Purunga, everything that came before it is pretty sick too. Super Saiyan 3 vs. Goma is an insanely clean fight, and I'll be honest, if it wasn't clear already, I love Super Saiyan 3. I love its design, and I love its presentation as the ultimate unstable supercharged form, and here is no exception. They also mess around with some POV shots from both Goma and Goku's perspective, which is always a welcome sight. I'm also a big fan of Super Saiyan 3 too. I know some people are going to write this off as goofy and ridiculous, but I think the gimmick here is explained with Boo's copycat ability that both Majins are seen to display throughout the franchise. It even ends with a goof as Doo just gets punched out of the fight once his cookie power runs out. And alright, here we are, Super Saiyan 4. I love it. It's beautiful. The design recaptures its GT iteration, yet also has its own unique identity. Personally, I'm a big fan of the monkey hands, as it helps Goku look more like a monkey, go figure. I also think it was a good idea to keep Goku Mini for now, as this is a site we've never had the chance to see in GT, meaning that Daima is still breaking new ground even if it wants to recycle and reimagine old concepts. And Goku and Goma's clash is just awesome. There's no other word to describe it. Like I just mentioned Super Saiyan 3, but Daima manages to separate these two forms via how they are presented in the narrative. Goku's aura is overwhelming and his power is explosive in Super Saiyan 4. Seeing Goku turn the tides in the new form and the shift in the fight style is a glorious representation and imagining of the form. The instances where he uses his tail and runs on his hands made me giddy, and the moment where the music kicks in, as he just starts beating the shit out of Goma, it just gives me chills. Like, it literally gave me chills watching it for the review, and it was at least like my fifth or sixth time watching through it. It's amazing. Having Glorio and the others join back in the fight is also a sweet moment and was a cool payoff. And then Goku's Kamehameha is just based. And I think I can speak for all when I say that I'm glad the fight didn't end here and that Goma got back up. This is mostly because of what follows in episodes 19 and 20, but if it ended here, it would just seem a little easy, wouldn't it? And then finally, Ultimate Purunga is a beautiful addition to the Dragon Ball world, and honestly caught me off guard. Like in my mind, this moment, not Super Saiyan 4, but this moment solidified Daima as a GT reimagining, and I'm all here for it. While I do have more thoughts on Super Saiyan 4's return, I'd rather wait to get into that until after the final episode review and ranking. For now, just know that I have no notes, and I'm giving episode 18 my new highest score of a 9.5 out of 10. Betrayal cuts pretty quick to the chase. Gloria used the demonic Dragon Balls to revert the Wish nerfing our heroes. We see their reactions to growing back up and getting back used to their bodies. Purunga then thanks him for the wish, and then he dissipates and the Dragon Balls scatter. With them back to their normal bodies, Goku insists that they now fight Goma one-on-one. Since Goku already took his turn against Do, it's Vegeta time. While Vegeta starts his fight with Goma, we see Arinsu's reaction to Glorio betraying her. Arinsu simply fires him and implies that these two have quite the history. Glorio thanks Arinsu for everything she's done for him, and he runs back to the gang. Vegeta is hoping that he's not too late as he transforms into Super Saiyan 3 to fight Goma. Upon walking up to the group, Glorio doesn't know if he's allowed back in, as he did lie to them and he hid his true intentions the entire time. This question gets answered with Pansy running up to him, grabbing his arms, and dragging him back to the group, our main cast thanking him for doing the right thing in the end. Even Goku, who thanks him as he finally gets his name right. But no one cares about that, let's get back to the cool shit, am I right, fellas? Ultra Vegeta 1 does the final flash, but Goma refuses to go down. While Vegeta doesn't necessarily Vegeta it, he does fail to beat Goma. Meanwhile, the gang are thinking about how to defeat him. Arinsu, with the help of Ku, finds out that if Goma is hit in the back of the head 3 times in a row, the eye will pop out. This causes Goku to come up with a plan, scheming with Piccolo. But before that plan goes into action, Vegeta has got to back down. And now, it's Bulma time, as she walks up and literally tells Vegeta to get his head out of his ass. When this doesn't work, Bulma threatens to take bath time away, and upon doing so, Vegeta immediately backs down. And now, Goku is up. Flying up to Goma, Goku checks him out and tells him to get a good look. Goku then transforms into Super Saiyan 2, and then shows off Super Saiyan 3. But there's one more, as Goku screams his heart out and pushes himself to the next frontier, ripping off his shirt and exploding his aura through all of the Demon Realm. The calm aftermath shows that Goku's body has recognized and allowed him to maintain his ascension. Climbing up from jagged rocks, Goku raises his arm in the air triumphantly, ready to show off the true power of Super Saiyan 4. First pro, look at this MFer aura farming in Purunga's Holy Light. Goma vs Ultra Vegeta 1 is a beautiful fight, and seeing Vegeta go all out for the first time is pretty cool. The return of the final flash is an awesome clash as well, when is it not? While on the topic of Vegeta, he doesn't Vegeta it. Yeah, I mean, he loses to Goma, but at the very least, he doesn't mess anything up or make it worse for the cast. Also, the way he gets out of the fight is definitively the funniest gag in Daima, and was a hilarious payoff for having Bulma join this adventure. The nice cherry here is everyone's reaction, with half of our cast being embarrassed and shocked, while Goku stands there either like cluelessly, or as if he's just saying like, huh, alright, yeah, good on you, man. Either way, it's a funny bit. As for sweet character accolades, Glorio, man. I will go more in depth with him in a future section, but for now, I think his arc is really sweet, and seeing him feel guilty for his actions and then seeing him being accepted and dragged back into the group reflects the bonds these characters have grown throughout their journey. The moment is solidified with Goku finally getting his name right. This shot of Goku and Glorio is one of my favorites in the entire show. Bravo, man. Other sweet character relationship moments is Goku and Piccolo. When they're plotting to defeat Goma, the way their dialogue is written and how they're performed gives the impression that these two go way back and have just become old friends. Just a wholesome interaction amongst his final battle. Finally, shout out to Ku for being able to find out Goma's weakness. And then Goku is the GOAT. Right here, this is the best shonen protagonist of all time. I mean, just look at him. This demonic entity just crushed his rival and stands as the most foreboding and powerful being he's faced thus far, and he just gets ready to take him down with a smile on his face, excited for the fight of his life. Him going through the Super Saiyans is probably the most visually appealing sequence in all of Dragon Ball. And I mean that. Everything here is on point. The design, the fluidity of it, the shading, the aura, everything here is perfect. An underrated aspect of the entirety of Daima is its music. The track that plays when Goku goes Super Saiyan 3 and then Super Saiyan 4 is perfect and builds the thematic tension for the moment in a way that just can't be put into words. It is so good. The way Goku powers up to Super Saiyan 4 and the ways we see his body change make Super Saiyan 4 feel like a new pinnacle, as well as the proper evolution to the already all-powerful Super Saiyan 3. Shirtless Super Saiyan 3 Goku is something I didn't know I needed to see. Also, the shots of Tamagami 2 and 3 just hanging out as Goku lights up the entire demon realm is an immaculate aura shot. And finally, we see it. Adult Super Saiyan 4. His emergence and posing here is some of the coolest shit we've seen thus far. And dear God, I'm going to choose to believe that this here is a GT reference. It's just perfect. Now, before I get into my ranking of this episode, I want to go on a bit of a relevant side tangent. I don't think it's controversial to say that episode 19 is one that's mostly hype, moments, and pretty animation. While I do believe the story elements that are here are the best we've seen so far, it's clear that this episode is going down in history as the debut of adult Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta and the true return of Super Saiyan 4. Calling stuff like this goated may come off as monkey-brained. Like, equating flashing lights and good animation to peak storytelling might seem a little simple-minded. But I think there's deeper analysis here that can be done, as there has to be a reason why stuff like this works so often. Essentially, I think there's an appeal and sometimes a more intricate explanation to explain why hype shit like this works so often in shonen, and especially in Dragon Ball. To best explain what I'm getting at, let's look at a pretty obvious moment from the original series. Gohan's Super Saiyan 2 transformation against Cell and the father-son Kamehameha. These moments from the original series are some of the most iconic in its presentation of the new Super Saiyan evolution and the defeat of Cell. While Super Saiyan 2 Gohan's design is pretty peak with a new hairdo and sharp facial expression, and the Kamehameha is titanic and one of the most powerful we've seen thus far. But what truly solidifies these flashy moments as an amazing narrative climax is the emotional buildup and payoffs intrinsically tethered to it. We care about Gohan going Super Saiyan 2 because we see that he was pushed to his breaking point, and after the death of 16, Super Saiyan 2 is the direct outcome and personification of his grief and guilt over not being able to protect the world he loves. Not only that, but this moment is the culmination of the instances that have defined Gohan as a character since his introduction. Every time Gohan gets really mad, he gets an insane power boost. Now in hindsight, was all seemingly building up to this very moment. By looking at this moment through this lens, we can see that it's much more than just flashing lights and screaming. Super Saiyan 2 Gohan is the payoff of chapters and chapters and episodes of character arcs and tense buildup for a huge finale. And I'm sure that you guys can all get the point, as I believe the same logic perfectly applies to Daima's 19th episode. While not as emotional as Super Saiyan 2 Gohan, I do believe seeing our characters fight in their adult forms do represent the climactic payoff for the entirety of Daima. Throughout the entire show, we are reminded that Goku and Vegeta are not at full strength. Along with this notion is that Goku is this mythical, all-powerful being in the Demon Realm, with moments like his Glorio fight showing that Goku truly is the strongest in this universe. But this notion is something that literally cannot have been fully realized due to him and the rest of the gang being children. Although Daima action scenes up until this point have been some of the best, it's clear to the viewer at all times that this is not the peak of what we could see. But then comes Betrayal, where we finally get to see it. We finally get to see Goku and Vegeta cut loose and show Goma who he's been messing with. We finally get to see the new frontier and the pinnacle of Saiyan power that's been slowly hinted at and presented in an immaculate manner. And it's because of all of this mixed in with the beautiful storytelling that I am giving episode 19 of Dragon Ball Daima a 10 out of 10. And we finally reached it. After 49 pages of a script, and I believe what's probably going to end up being like an hour 40 minutes of a video, we are at the final episode of Dragon Ball Daima. I'm sure you all can tell that I've been overwhelmingly positive in my review so far, so I bet you're all wondering, does it stick the landing? Let's waste no more time and find out. Maximum is the perfect title for this episode, as it wastes no time showing us the Saiyan brought to his primal peak fight the Supreme Demon King. Upon powering up, Goku starts the beatdown on Goma. The two end up fighting all over the arena, displaying the intricacies that Goma made and the overwhelming power both are capable of. I could explain the fight in more detail, but it's just so raw and mighty that words don't do it justice. The full extent of their styles is shown as well. Similar to his mini-self 2 episodes ago, adult Super Saiyan 4 Goku feels mighty and fights as if he's embodying the power of his new form. This is also the episode where we see Goma utilize his magical abilities the most. He bends reality at his whim, making energy blasts and his staff spawn out of nowhere. He also manipulates the area as he and Goku take a tour throughout the ring. Eventually, we see that both are reaching their limits, with Goma seemingly hitting the apex of his regeneration abilities, and Goku knowing that he can't keep up Super Saiyan 4 for much longer. And what follows is just stunning. Goku raises his arm in the air and unleashes all of his power, accompanied with a beautiful score and a wonderful performance by Masako Nozawa. After charging up, the battlefield goes silent, as Goku shifts his feet and poses his arms for a supreme Kamehameha. The Kamehameha pierces Goma's giant energy ball, but it keeps going, making a fresh hole through the Demon King's torso. But it ain't done there, as Goku keeps the power going. We see his blue energy beam pierce the entirety of the demon realm they're in, blowing a hole through the roof of the first and the second demon world, making it all the way to the third. With Goma reeling from his injury, Piccolo goes in to finish him off, but he fails as Giant Goma knocks him off his game. Goma, now realizing their plan, goes in and goes full Cell Max mode and tries to eradicate the Z-Fighters. Flying aimlessly through the battlefield, Ku ends up next to Goma's head and seizes the opportunity, hitting him in the back of the head 3 times with the Rinsu spellbook and finally knocking out the evil third eye. The eyeball then gets stomped on by Glorio, marking the end of Goma's reign. The end going down this way comes to a surprise to our characters, with them hesitating before cheering for Majin Ku. From here, we've reached resolution mode as we gotta wrap up what all of our characters are doing. With Goma locked up, the next question is, who's gonna be the next Demon King? Neva jokes that it should be the one who took out the previous king, meaning that the next one in line is none other than Majin Ku. Ku starts his reign by gleefully adding all of his friends to his ministry, well, all except Hybis. And now we've reached the official closers. We see Bulma get her Majinite, and Vegeta confronts Goku on seemingly hiding Super Saiyan 4 from him. Goku explains that Buu was so strong that he started investing his time into the next level up. The funniest part here is that Goku calls Vegeta a hypocrite and calls him out for hiding his unlocking of Super Saiyan 3. Flustered, Vegeta remarks that that wasn't Super Saiyan 3, but it was Ultra Vegeta 1. There's then a wholesome scene with our Namekians where Neva invites Piccolo and Dende to stay with him in the Demon Realm, but they deny this offer as they have duties back on Earth. Dende does promise to let the rest of his Namekian brothers know about his offer. Before the credits kick in, Pansy and Glorio are helping the Z-Fighters back, and King Kadon thanks Goku for all he's done, saying that you folks from the outside world have really helped us out. And with the shields gone, the Majins are free to traverse from the Demon Realms as they please. And then, the last shot of Dragon Ball Daima is Goku and everyone waving goodbye as Jakajan kicks in and the credits roll. And we would be done with the plot synopsis, but there is a post-credit scene. Goku tells Glorio that he wants to get some more revive bugs as they're running low on sensu beans, so they return to that shop. The lady recognizes Goku and Shin, and the two of them, along with Bulma, Pansy, and Glorio, meander around the place. For whatever reason, and I mean this with no exaggeration, this is the best animated scene in the entire show. Bulma hears about what the Medibugs do, and Pansy finds an old bowl in the corner with some amount of magical consumables. Within this dusty bowl, they find 2 eyeballs, with the final reveal of the series being that the old lady shopkeep made the evil third eyes and talks about them as if they're just any average relic, unbeknownst to the climactic battle that transpired the previous days. The final shot of Daima is a shocked expression shared amongst our gang as we are all hit with the end card. The final battle was well worth the wait. The sight of modern Super Saiyan 4 with animation quality that defines the peak of the new age of the shonen genre is spectacular. Goma and Goku go band for band in this creative fight that feels reminiscent of climactic battles past, but also new in its own way. The decision to shift the battlegrounds into the interior of the ring was one that properly remixed the fight. Every blow and strike delivered feels powerful and deliberate, which is something that I think modern Dragon Ball has lost. And then there's that Kamehameha. This might just be in the top 5 of the best blue beams ever fired in the franchise. The weight behind it is incredible, and the way Goku charges up for it feels not only heavy and powerful, but triumphant and hopeful. There's also some deliberate thematic choices here that are just peak cinema. To have the music cease after Goku finishes charging is beautiful, and the shot of the hole through the demon realm and then Goma's silhouette was pure Kino. This is also one of the coolest feats in the entire series. Like, yeah, it's not as powerful as Goku and Beerus, but it looks a hell of a lot cooler. And then there's Goma's defeat. And that's right, I'm putting it in the pros section. I don't care what you guys say. I think a lot of folks would be upset with this narrative decision, but I think it characterizes Daima incredibly well. It sort of acts as a self-referential joke, but not one that spits in the face of everything that came before it. In fact, I think this sentence describes Goku and Vegeta's interaction towards the end and the post-credit scene perfectly. Daima is a series that takes itself a bit less serious than Z, yet it still pays homage to its predecessors and crafts its own identity by making jokes like this. The delivery of these bits also suit the series. Glorio just squishing the eye and the way Pansy and Glorio look at each other before Ku says, what? It's all based. As for the actual resolution, King Ku is a fun and fitting end for the characters here. I like Shin and Arinsu's interaction about Arinsu becoming the Demon King, and the two really banter like siblings here. Shout out to the cool transition sequence with the artificial waterfall Goku made. There's a lot of little stuff here that I adore, like Ku making his robes just appear and then Goku sitting on the rock before going, no, we're going home. It's the little things that really tie the whole series and this finale and these characters together. The gag with Hybis not joining the Ministry at the end is the perfect send-off for Charlie Dompa. And speaking of send-off, the shot where Goku and the Z-Fighters are waving goodbye is one of the best of the show. It's a beautiful full-circle moment that perfectly reflects these characters and their quirks. I mean, look at Vegeta pretending like he doesn't want to wave goodbye. He could have stopped Pansy here if he really wanted to, but he didn't. As for the credits and the post-credit scene, the art of the characters reacting to growing back up, again, is super cute, and seeing Goma and Degusu being bros in their prison is also charming. If it wasn't clear already, I am a fan of the post-credit scene, and I think it really defines what Daima was going for as a series. It's cute, it's funny, it's full of charm, it's wholesome, it's beautiful, it's amazing. And while this isn't all I have to say about the finale, it's all I want to say for now, so just know that I'm giving the final episode of Dragon Ball Daima another 10 out of 10. With that, the last section of the episode review is the classic episode ranking. I'm going to spare most of the individual review stuff in this section, as we just did all that, and mostly talk about how these episodes compare to one another. So first off are our 6.5s, and our bottom two episodes are episode 15, The Third Eye, and episode 16, Degusu. Now these two are tied for the lowest score of 6.5 out of 10, and to be clear, neither of them are atrocious. For me, mid is a title I give to things that are anywhere in the 4 to 6 out of 10 range, meaning that these episodes barely scrape past that. In terms of content, both of them are just lackluster compared to the rest of the series. The pacing is not good, and in my view, they have some of the laziest writing. Episode 15 has artificially slow pacing due to neither Goku nor Vegeta transforming, and 16 features Degusu's seemingly random betrayal. Once again, neither of them are bad. They still have Daima's beautiful art style and animation, and both of them offer some plus sides in the Demon Realm world building and story. If you absolutely need a ranking of the two of them, then the 20th spot would be episode 15, and the 19th spot would be episode 16, as the plus of our gang finally meeting Arinsu and Degusu is more important and impactful than the lore of the Third Eye offered in Third Eye. Not only that, but episode 15 probably features the worst action sequence in the whole show. It gets good towards the end, but a good 15 minutes of the episode is just Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo getting shot at with blue lasers, which gets repetitive rather quickly. Next up are our two 7 out of 10s. The 18th spot is going to episode 14, Taboo, and the 17th spot is going to episode 3, Daima. We've already moved beyond the mid-tier into the episodes that I would safely call good. These two got a score out of 7 out of 10 for different reasons. For Taboo, I think the pacing is a bit too slow for my liking, while Daima is just an episode that doesn't share as many highs as the rest of the series. That's not to say that either episodes don't have their good moments, as Taboo shows the power of Neva to almost its full extent, and Daima does the monumentally important job of formally introducing us to the third demon world. A task it does pretty well, but the scenes that are there just aren't as entertaining as what comes after it. And now we're at our 7.5s, and the 16th spot is Pansy, which is episode 5, 15th is Glorio, episode 2, and 14th is Collar, episode 7. What's funny is that all three of these episodes pretty much work on the same front, being character building. With episodes 5 and 2 introducing us to our main characters original to Daima, and episode 7 being a good team bonding episode. Pansy is at the bottom, as if you guys remember, I was thinking this episode was sort of slow, but it just seamlessly jam-packs so much info that I think it's worthy of this ranking. Glorio is an episode that has the appeal of being the second episode, meaning it's the first where our characters respond to the plot. And I put Collar at the top of this bunch as it's the start of the team bonding between our 4 A-plot characters, and the moves made here are wholesome, and it does do the proper build-up for the peak that is episode 8. On to the 8s, this is the largest bunch of episodes. At 13th place we have Thieves, which is episode 9, 12th is Ocean, which is episode 10, 11th is Legend, which is episode 11, and officially starting our top 10 is Chatty with episode 4. Episodes 9 to 11 are the bridge between 8 and 12, and saying that sentence out loud sounds stupid, but the point is that this chunk of the series is the cooldown and the rebuild up from the hype moment to hype moment. Thieves has some fun action sequences, but it's clear they wanted this episode to be the recharge period from the first Tamagami fight to the second. Episodes 11 and 12 feature some fun antics in the second demon world, and mark the start of the solidification of our heroes' bonds and relationships with one another. Episode 12 also marks the unification of our A-plot heroes, and both episodes have some bangin' fight sequences and monumental lore, which is commendable. But similar to episode 7, they exist and are formatted in a way that's meant to build up the peak that is episode 12. Episode 4 might seem like a random start to our top 10, but this episode is so much fun. I can't stress enough how much I love the Sky Seed seed, and with the post-credit scene, this episode retroactively gains some value. Episode 4 is also the start of how masterfully they handle Goku in this show, and I think that deserves high praise. Speaking of high praise, let's get into our 8.5s. That's right, almost half of this show is above an 8 out of 10. In 9th place, we have Surprise, which is episode 13. 8th is Lightning, which is episode 6. And 7th is Conspiracy, which is episode 1. Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you guys. When I started this rewatch, I did not expect to regard episode 13 so highly. This episode is fun, it's beautiful, and I would almost go as far to say that it literally defines Daima. It's the cooldown from episode 12's peak, but the antics are just so enjoyable to watch and breathtakingly beautiful. That being said, it is definitely an episode that's mostly world building and doesn't drive the plot as far as others, nor does it have the peak fight scenes of almost every episode above it at this point. And as I mentioned in my initial review of it, Lightning is the first hype/headliner fight of Daima and is almost a perfect 50-50 split of the OG Dragon Ball antics and the beautiful OG Z fight scenes. Goku and Glorio's characterization here is peak, and I maintain that Glorio's moveset is just stunning to look at. However, at this point, most of these episode placements can be described as they're great, but other episodes just have higher highs. Now, the main exception to this sentiment is our number 7 spot, Conspiracy, or episode 1. Conspiracy is a damn near perfect first episode, and because it's the first episode, you sort of have to look at it through a different lens, as it has a different job than any other in the series. Conspiracy perfectly introduces us to the demon realm, our antagonists, their motivations, our protagonists, where they're at now, and what the stakes of the show are. It also cocks and loads pretty much every Chekhov's gun that fires throughout the show. And what more could you ask for? Oh wait, there's a perfect recreation of the hypest moments from the last saga of Z, which not only sparks nostalgia into old viewers, but masterfully catches new viewers up to speed? Well, okay, I guess that's pretty cool too. Sarcasm aside, Conspiracy is such a phenomenal first episode that I genuinely believe you can tell someone who hasn't seen Dragon Ball at all to start with Daima, and they would perfectly follow the entirety of the show's plot because of how great a job this episode does at setting up the rest of the show. I think nothing more speaks to the quality of Daima for me than the fact that we have 6 episodes to go in this ranking, and they're all a 9 out of 10 or above. The 9s were episode 8, 12, and 17, which were the 3 Tamagami fights, and the start of the final battle. And I think controversially, I am putting episode 12 at 6th place, 17 at 5th, and episode 8 at our number 4 spot. Episode 12 is probably the 3rd or 4th biggest episode in terms of meta importance and relevance, but even taking all of that out of the equation, it's a phenomenal ass episode. It breaks new ground with its presentation of Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta, and the Do fight is nothing to slouch at either. But if I were to turbo nitpick, then episodes 17 and 8 are just tighter stories and, in my opinion, look better. Like, episode 17 is the debut of the third Eye Goma, and the scene where he gets jumped to when Goku goes Super Saiyan 3 is literally perfect and so clean with its animation. Meanwhile, episode 8 has perfect execution and some of the best balance between story and fighting in Daima. Goku's Kamehameha feels as powerful as it should, and masterfully sets up the power of the Tamagamis and the extent of Goku's strength. The music in this scene is so triumphant, and the story stuff that follows is the perfect blend of plot driving, world building, and wholesome character interactions. And our number 3 spot is the only 9.5, episode 18, Awakening. Come on, man. It's the return of Super Saiyan 4, the peak Super Saiyan 3 fight, and it's the debut of Ultimate Purunga. I could say more, but I don't think I have much else to say about this one that wasn't in the initial review. With a spot like this and rankings such as this one, it comes down to the fact that I think this episode is better and more hyped than the ones that come before it, but it doesn't gain the same perfect status as the ones after it. And lastly, we have episodes 19 and 20, which are my only two 10 out of 10s. So, which one do I think is better? It may come as a surprise to some, but I think I'm going to say Maximum is our number 2 spot, and Daima's best episode is episode 19, Betrayal. It's hard to compare perfect to perfect, peak to peak, but I think there is one thing to be said about Maximum that I have to go into that puts it below Betrayal. Why I think Maximum is the perfect finale, with Adult Super Saiyan 4 vs. Goma being a top 5 Dragon Ball fight, and the antics that follow perfectly characterizing and finalizing Daima as a show, there are some criticisms of it as a finale that I disagree with, but I understand where people are coming from. The same cannot be said for Betrayal, which is hype and peak through and through. And I don't think that's a controversial statement whatsoever. One of the criticisms of Maximum that I initially had that went away quickly is that I thought that Goku vs. Goma was too brief of a fight. But after reflecting and thinking on it, I no longer have this view. This is because at this point in the show, the gang have been fighting Goma for almost 3 episodes straight, and what is there is just phenomenal to the point that there really wouldn't really be a point to elongating it. There are other criticisms that I want to address in the next section. I know this has been the second time I brought that up, and I keep putting it off, but similar to the show's first episode, a show's last episode has to be looked at through a different lens, and while I think Maximum is a perfect finale, there are others that disagree, and I want to dedicate proper time to such a view. To end off talking about these last two, we are in the weeds and certainly nitpicking critiques for these episodes. But when you call something peak fiction or a 10 out of 10, it needs to be held to a standard that properly reflects and gives it such a rating, as anything less would be disingenuous. And it's because of this that Maximum lands at our number 2 spot and Betrayal is number 1, marking Daima's best episode and the end of this ranking. And with all that, we can finally get into the overarching review section of this video. You guys might be confused as to how there's still so much video left, and the answer is simple. I believe that any show is more than just its individual episodes. Like, come on, if you average out the score I gave all the episodes, we're at an 8.2, but I think Daima is stronger than that. There are elements of any series that are only illuminated if the light is shining on it in its entirety as compared to just looking at bits and pieces of it. If I were to end the video with the episode ranking, there would still be a lot that I would want to cover that would go unaddressed. And if it wasn't clear already, I want to leave no stones unturned. The first of these elements I want to go over is Daima's overarching plot and how it's written. To be blunt, this is the tightest Dragon Ball's writing has ever been. And that's not me referring to just modern Dragon Ball. I mean this in the entirety of the franchise. It's really difficult to poke holes in the story as just about everything builds upon either things that were introduced into the show or in the original series. Like, just Daima on a conceptual level acts as an extension of the original series. The Demon Realm is something that's been mostly untouched, at least by Akira Toriyama, and was clearly worthy of getting its own story placed inside of it. Most of the events in Daima happen because of other events, and very little of the show feels BS'd or ass-pulled. Like, Goku and the Z-Fighters are nerfed because they aren't used to their bodies. Arinsu tricks Goma into wishing them into kids because she wants to usurp him. Ku and Do have their Majinisms because they are directly tethered to Buu, with Do resembling him more because he is closer to Buu on a biological level. Even if there are elements that don't serve the direct purpose of furthering the plot, they add to the world and lore of Dragon Ball, which is to say that very little here should have been cut or changed, and if you ask me, that's a pretty good sign. The world building that is here also feels very deliberate and natural. Like, yeah, it makes sense that there are these race of giants, or that this place of ancient magic which gives birth to beings millions of years old is the origin of our universe. It's an extension that does nothing but complement what was already there. As for the story itself, Daima feels like a sequel to the Buu saga in all the right ways. The plot literally wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the Boo Saga, and there are other details that strongly relate to this. I could talk for hours about the focus on the magic and the addition of more Majin, but I feel like it would be redundant at this point. Another interesting point about Daima's plot is the fact that this is the most political Dragon Ball has been. And I know some folks are going to get turned off by the conversation just from me saying that word, but to be clear, I'm not referring to modern politics and social issues, but more so views on effective leadership and the ways oppression can manifest and hurt common folk. Like, much of Goma's villainy is told to us by showing how he's a dickhead of a king who stays in the first demon world, and he uses his violent police force to squash criticism and leave his subjects obedient. There's also the facets of border and class, with how only specific folks can leave or go to certain parts in the demon realm, and the ways the different worlds are portrayed. One of the most intriguing of this is the anchoring world tidbit that both Namekians and Glins left the demon realm due to them being oppressed and ruled over. And to be honest, I'm a fan. No one is expecting anything from Dragon Ball to be this beautiful and exquisite social commentary that challenges the status quo, but having a simple story told like this complements the others in the franchise quite nicely. An early criticism of Daima I remember hearing was that the show was paced poorly, with it being too slow and the wait for weekly episodes was tedious. I don't think this can be said for the entire show now that it's done. If you analyze the episode structure, then you'll find that the show is set up to feature highs and lows that follow each other naturally, so there's not too much of an off period before the next hype moment. Episodes 1 to 3 serve as a plot exposition and character introductions. 4 to 7 are build-up to the hype that is episode 8, with 6 being hype in its own right. 9 to 11 serves a similar purpose, where 9 is the cooldown, and then 10 and 11 are the build-up for 12. 13 is world building, and then 14 to 16 are the build-up for the 4-episode finale. And once you extrapolate the hype Z-esque episodes, you realize that there are 7 episodes that feature high-stakes, beautifully animated action sequences, while 4 of these are the last episodes and dedicated to the finale, with the other 3 featuring a very minimal wait between them, with the longest wait being episode 6, where you have to get through episodes 1 to 5. But even then, this isn't a problem when you consider that 1 to 3 are exposition, and you sort of have to go through them to understand the plot. As mentioned in my reviews, I think the only time the pacing is done poorly, to a degree, where criticism is due, is episodes 15 and 16, as just not enough happens in them, and I genuinely believe that if these episodes were collapsed into one, no one would complain. But I think the conversation fans aren't ready for is that Daima is certainly paced better than any of the other Dragon Ball anime, and it ain't even close. Like, it has to be given its 20-episode format, and when you look at the first 20 episodes of the other shows, you realize, wow, all of Dragon Ball is a slow burn, which the same cannot be said about Daima. To show this, let's go through a bonus mini-section. 20 episodes in OG Dragon Ball, you are just starting the first tournament. It's the preliminary round, meaning the only climactic thing that's happened thus far is Pilaf's defeat. In Z, the showdown with Vegeta and Nappa has yet to begin by the show's 20th episode. In fact, you have to wait another episode for them to crash down to Earth. Granted, they do fit Raditz in here, but even then, the Z episodes are paced at a rate that is slower than its manga chapters. Yes, you heard me right. At Chapter 20 of Dragon Ball Z, which is a weekly shonen, you are farther in the story's plot than Episode 20 of Dragon Ball Z. Z-Kai is the only exception to this entire bonus section, as 20 episodes in, you have already started the Namek Saga, and if you ask me, this is how it should be. By episode 20 of GT, Goku has just started his showdown with Rildo, meaning we are still not done yet with the Black Star Dragon Ball Saga, and have not yet reached the plot points where GT starts to get good, or at least where people say it starts to get good. There's no Super Saiyan 4 yet, Goku has barely been pushed at all, and there's been like one hype fight, maybe, being the one against Legic. And finally, my favorite, your guys' favorite, in episode 20 of Dragon Ball Super, you have just watched the first episode of the Resurrection F arc. That's right. If you and your buddy started watching Daima and Super respectively at the same time, starting from episode 1, and you watched both shows at the same rate, you would have finished Daima while your friend still has to watch an entire movie recap. The point here isn't to shit on the other shows in the Dragon Ball mythos, as if you think Daima has poor pacing, someone pointing out that all of Dragon Ball having bad pacing doesn't magically fix that problem present in Daima. Rather, I want to point out a logic that's going to become more pertinent as this video goes on, and by saying that if you think Daima has poor pacing, then you must bite the bullet and say that all of Dragon Ball has poor pacing, as the story of Daima flows at a much more accelerated and natural rate than any of the other Dragon Ball anime, once again with the exception of Kai. I must also remind you all that fast pacing does not equal good pacing, but the criticism I've heard is not that Daima is too fast, but that it's too slow. And if you think this, you must think this about the rest of Dragon Ball if you want to remain consistent in your views. As for its climax and resolution, once again, I find that it tracks and makes a hell of a lot of sense. The third eye and its power was mentioned in the literal first episode, and Hybis was wearing his belt since his introduction in episode 5. And Hybis doing this just feels like something he would do and aligns with his previous characterization. Goma wanting to kill the Z-Fighters out of fear they're going after him aligns with his initial anxiety that Arinsu took advantage of. Glorio betraying Arinsu may seem cliche, but cliches are cliches because at some point they were foreign and were well written. And although not foreign to Daima, it is an example of how to execute this trope well. And Goma's defeat and all that happens with him and Ku afterwards, yeah, it just tracks. I know a lot of people were against this ending as it comes off as a bit anticlimactic, but that's kind of the point. Clearly the purpose of this ending was to subvert the notion that this was going to be like Z or Super, and instead fit with the goofier tropes and beats present within the OG series, and well, itself. But even if it wasn't the case, and Daima was more of a super turbo serious series, this ending still works. It aligns with Ku's characterization and gives the character the proper payoff he deserved after getting sidelined by Arinsu and his brother. And the sideline comment isn't a slight against the show, just a fact about how Arinsu wrote him off for not being that powerful. But despite that, he ends up being integral to Goma's defeat, and his innocent demeanor marks a new era for the Demon Realm, meaning that the status quo here has fundamentally changed by this ending and these decisions. Sorry, that was a lot. Along with Super Saiyan 4, there is more I have to say about Daima's finale, but that will be saved towards the end of the video for thematic purposes. For now, I need to address something that I've been putting off for quite a while. The join bugs. A lot of people were upset that Goku and Vegeta didn't fuse in this story because of the fact that these were so explicitly mentioned and shown. And well, I just don't mind their absence. Everything else in Daima is so clean that not fusing just wasn't a problem with me. I wouldn't even say they were forgotten. With their absence in the show's climax, it becomes clear that the quote payoff for the join bugs was indeed Goku dropping them in episode 17. Of course, this is unsatisfying for some, as fusion is awesome, but people have blown this up to such a comical degree. To call the entirety of Daima bad and write off its accolades because of this is just bad faith, and I think it speaks to a greater criticism of the Dragon Ball community, which is its own section here. I know I keep saying things like, oh, this will get brought back up, as compared to just talking about it, but I do so because A, I want people to know that I haven't forgotten certain elements that need to be talked about, especially criticisms, and B, it's hard to fit certain topics under one uniform umbrella or theme, as there are subjects that just belong to a lot of different conversations that could be had. So while the Daima finale is a monumental part of the show's overarching plot and can be talked about in a conversation about its story, it can also be referenced and talks about what it means and does for both the Dragon Ball franchise and its community. With that mini rant done, just know that the Daima plot is masterfully crafted and well executed. If I'm thinking about an anime's plot and how written it's going to be, I'm going to be comparing it to Daima, as I think it works incredibly well as a standard for a simple yet great story. Now, let's get into the sections that I'm most excited for. The character reviews. After years of thinking too deeply about shows and stories, I've come to realize that the most important thing in storytelling for me is a likable cast. After all, if you're not rooting for the victory of the protagonists, then why are you watching? It's up to the show to make you want to care for these characters. Daima exists in a particular place in a conversation such as this one because it's an addition to a massive franchise, meaning it has the special task of not only making sure it sticks true to the series' returning cast, but also establishes and does justice to its own additions to the franchise. Because of that, this section is going to run down the line of characters who originate from the original series and see how they were portrayed and utilized, while the next one is going to go over Daima's additions to Dragon Ball and see how well they fit and how well they were utilized. Starting with our orange hillbilly, Goku is just awesome in this show. If you remember, I mentioned how Goku is portrayed as being more juvenile when he's mini. And I don't think this was done with the intent to revert him back to a previous character status, but rather invigorate and recapture the fearless optimism that defined him back in his introduction. Seeing the way he tackles this magical and strange place is nothing but awe-inspiring. Daima does portray Goku as confident, but not overconfident. This is clearly seen in how he interacts with Glorio, and inevitably, Goma. Everything he does aligns with his characterization in the Buu saga, where he was this all-powerful martial artist to introduce the mythical beings and new heights of power. An important note that I've mentioned a couple times already is that Goku isn't an asshat in Daima. I can't stress enough how much I dislike Super's portrayal of Goku as this all-powerful being who becomes this petty brat when he doesn't get his way, or throws needless jabs at his friends for no reason. Daima Goku just doesn't feel like that at any point in the show's run. Something to note is that Goku, and most of the original cast, don't exactly go through a character arc, which some may critique, but I don't think this is a problem at all for a few reasons. The first is that Goku, and a lot of these characters, are already completed. Like, Goku's journey as a martial artist and the ironing out of his personality and growth has already been done. That story exists in the form of Dragon Ball Z, which Daima is a sequel of. The next is that, although this is the case, it's not like Goku is a bland character who doesn't properly react to the world around him. His personality is still oozing from just about all of his interactions, and him reaching the new heights of Super Saiyan 4 is a direct consequence of the Buu saga, meaning that although he doesn't go through any arcs, he's still training and he's still as proactive as ever. Next on my list is Shin, which may come as a surprise, but I think if you're listing the OG cast in terms of importance, he's probably number 2. To say that Daima utilizes this character well would be a gross understatement. Shin is an interesting character in the Dragon Ball mythos. The fact that he was introduced in the Buu saga means that there wasn't much time to explore him in the original series, and we instead mostly go off of Z's sequel series to see a more nuanced way the character is portrayed. With that, I think I can speak for everyone when I say that Daima is the best portrayal of this character and the best he's ever been. Shin is quite literally the glue of this series. He bridges the Z-cast to the world of characters of Daima, and the manner in which he does so is, once again, incredibly natural and believable. His careful and hesitant nature allows him to contrast well with Goku's fearlessness. This, in tandem with the down-to-earth way he interacts with the new additions to the cast, makes Nahare seem more like a deity than he ever has before. And also, I gotta say it again, I just love his relationship with Goku. It's really wholesome, and I'm gonna keep praising it. Onto the Prince Vegeta. Similar to Goku, he feels at home with his portrayal in the Buu saga. He's got the serious, arrogant nature about him, but it's clear that he decides to put up with the antics of his wife and his friends. By far, my favorite detail about Vegeta's portrayal in Daima is that Goku isn't his motivation. Vegeta barely talks about how he's trying to surpass Kakarot. Get this. You know how Vegeta in the Buu saga accepts that Goku is stronger than him and that it's just the reality of the situation? Well, in Daima, it seems that Vegeta still believes that and is no longer trying to surpass that which he could never beat. And you guys may be thinking, why, of course, tough man. Why would Vegeta be portrayed as anything different after the Buu saga? Gee, I don't know. All jokes aside, Vegeta going Super Saiyan 3, I think, was a good way to depict how even though Vegeta is not chasing Goku, he's still trying to better himself and get stronger. And just like Goku and Shin, his interactions perfectly reflect his more domesticated Buu saga personality and are a joy to watch. Like, tell me you don't enjoy Vegeta being proud of the fact that he's no longer eating sentient alien species. Bulma is an interesting one, as it feels like she's here mostly to respark her initial journey with Goku. But what's funny about Bulma is that I feel like she comes in clutch when it comes to driving conversation, thinking through certain plans throughout the show. Like, think back to episode 10 when we get the origin of the universe. It starts because Shin goes, hey, do you guys want to hear something cool? And Goku just goes, no, I'm good, not really. But Bulma decides to say, why, yes, I do. While I think she is delegated to mostly a background role in this show, it's clear she plays a pivotal part in some of the finer intricacies of the social dynamics between our protags, and I thank her for that. Her and Vegeta are also as cute as ever. This is something all post-Z has dealt with really well, and Daima is no exception. Dende has a brief section here, as he is monumentally important to the plot of Daima, as he is an OG character, but he doesn't do much of anything and is instead a plot device. I'm okay with this, for reasons I'll get into, but even if you view this as a criticism, I think the stakes being Dende's life was a good decision. It makes it so our characters are invested and obligated to foil Goma's plans, but it's not as extreme as the entire universe being destroyed like the Buu saga or most of Super. And now, we've reached him. We're finally at my biggest criticism of Dragon Ball Daima, and the only thing about the series that I would change on a conceptual level. Piccolo. My boy. What happened? The problem with Piccolo and Daima isn't what's there, it's what's not there. Piccolo is part of the journey for its entirety, and yet he does almost nothing the entire show. It's bizarre how underutilized he is given how well everyone else is written. He does join in group fight scenes, but at no point does he have a moment that's wholly his, nor does he interact enough to display any additional or special characterization. And I love Piccolo. If you ask me who the best Dragon Ball character is, my instinct is to respond with Piccolo. But he just doesn't do enough in Daima. He's quiet and delegated to a background character. He does chime in whenever Neva is involved and does deliver interesting lore, but if I'm being fully transparent, I think you could have cut him and little is lost from Daima's identity or plot. Literally, all they had to do was give him some moment to himself, where without him, the plot would have been different. I would say Bulma is infinitely better in Daima as without her, not only would there be a lot of awkward moments and miscommunication, but Goma just would have killed Vegeta. Compare this to Piccolo, who hardly interacts and fails to do anything substantial to Goma. It's a sad fact, but it's one that I just can't deny or ignore. Daima botched Piccolo. It is the worst thing about the show. To end this list, let's talk about the half-breed elephant in the room, or rather, waiting outside the door. Where the hell was Gohan this entire show? This is something a lot of fans have lambasted Daima for, and some folks have extended this to not just Gohan, but most of the extended Dragon Ball cast. And I don't want to come off as an egoist or say that my opinion is better than anyone else's, but I don't think it takes much critical thinking to realize that this is a non-issue. Like, yeah, Gohan is a fan favorite. Yes, Dragon Ball has a big cast, but what were these characters going to do that wasn't already accomplished by who's there? With the mention of Piccolo in the last section, you can argue that Daima's cast was already too big. So why would they add a Gohan or any more characters to this? Going back to my point all the way back in episode 9, it's clear they split the cast so they could have more intimate moments with the original characters and the new characters, as compared to having interactions of subpar quality and depth amongst a bunch of characters at the same time. It comes back to the idea of quality, not quantity. This idea is something that's not even foreign to the Dragon Ball franchise. Like in GT, Goku is accompanied by Trunks and Pan, so that the story can focus on the relationship amongst these three, as compared to a scattered story that focuses on 30 characters. Even Super understood this with certain arcs, where Broly only features Goku, Vegeta, and Broly because the tagline of the film was the story of the three Saiyans. Any character who isn't necessary to the story is then understandably absent from the film. And notice how in both of these examples, there's a character who's new to the franchise, or at least an iteration of them. This is so they can be introduced and compared to what's already there. Pan's immaturity in relation to Goku and Trunks' experience allows Pan to be explored and grow as a character. Dragon Ball Super Broly isn't exactly like this, but there's a point to be made about how Broly's wrath and power is supposed to contrast with Goku's calmness and Vegeta's actualization, and that by experiencing each other, all three of them grow. This line of logic is even more true when you apply it to Granola, which also is an entire saga that consists of only 6 characters. This is to say that the OG cast was limited in Daima to explore and watch the growth of its additions to the cast, something that I believe would have been mitigated had there been an additional 5 main characters. To end off this portion, I just want to ask, would you genuinely have preferred, Gohan, Krillin, Roshi, and Tien, for example, to have joined the Demon Realm to do nothing as compared to just not having them there at all? And if so, why? I'm genuinely curious why people think this. With the original cast out of the way, let's dive into the new characters introduced in Daima. I don't think there's a better character to start with than Glorio. Glorio is one of the only characters in the entirety of the show to go through a traditional character arc, and the way it's executed is exquisite. It's never the direct focus of an episode until the end of the show. Instead, it's something that's slowly drip-fed to the viewer throughout the entire series. Through Shin, we find out rather quickly that we ought to be suspicious of Glorio's intentions, and by episode 6, we know that he's working for Rinsu. I think the upshot to this presentation is twofold. First, it allows the viewer to see that Glorio is against our protagonists, building tension as to when he is going to inevitably get caught in this lie. Second, and more importantly, it allows the viewer to witness the growth and change of heart Glorio has as a result of his interactions with Goku and the other Z-Fighters. This then makes the reveal of him betraying Rinsu and not the Z-Fighters much more believable and natural. Goku and Glorio's relationship is, no joke, one of the best things from Daima. When talking about the peak of the peak that is episodes 18 and 19, hell, and 20 of this show, people ought to mention Glorio's involvement and how seeing Goku's resilience caused him to betray his employer and potential parental figure for the sake of doing what's right. Oh, and by the way, none of that is directly stated. It's all told to us through visual storytelling, avoiding clunky and forced characterization. This gloomy guy who inevitably starts to cheer up and gain a more optimistic worldview due to Goku's influence is almost textbook Dragon Ball. And they understood the assignment. Pansy is our second Daima original main character. She's supposed to contrast well with Glorio's gloominess and play off of Goku and Shin's extreme knowledge and power. Honestly, I don't have much to say about Pansy other than I think she's a good addition to the cast, who does some necessary world building for the story and plays off well with Shin, Goku, and Glorio. This is through both her position as a weaker third world demon, but also the fact that she's the technician before Bulma becomes a member of the main crew. She plays a role similar to Shin in the Buu saga, and that she becomes a guide for this new world our protags are in, but is also shocked and surprised by the overwhelming power of our protagonists. I'm also a fan of her budding friendship with Glorio. She writes him off and makes fun of him for being gloomy, but through their respective accolades in the series, they come to appreciate one another, so much so that it's Pansy who drags Glorio back into the group after the Purunga wish. Another important thing to note about Pansy is that the story doesn't overuse her. Like, she's not overbearing and annoying in Daima as child characters have the potential to be. Most of her interactions and reactions track and are aligned with her worldview. A good side note in the Pansy portion, I'm going to mention King Kadan and the other third world demons. These characters aren't the most relevant to Daima's story and don't get the most amount of screen time, but they do have some fun designs and moments that complement the world of Daima nicely. And now, we've reached my GOAT. I've got to be honest with you all, I love Neva. The role of the kooky old mage is portrayed masterfully through this character. It's clear that his goal is to drive the plot whenever necessary. I think there's a lot of folks that can call out and think this character is a bullshit character, but I don't think this is the case. Namekians are the magic class in Dragon Ball who've always had the capabilities to do stuff like this. Their abilities and know-how permeates and drives the plot of pretty much the entirety of the series. Since Kami, magical Namekians have had these abilities. Shenron dies, Kami brings it back. Frieza wounds our heroes, Dende heals them. Kami is written out, Dende makes a new, stronger pair of Dragon Balls. Toriyama needs everyone revived on Earth, well, good luck. Purunga just so happened to get an upgrade. We need to know how strong Black Frieza is. Monaito can suddenly heal Goku and Vegeta to full. Piccolo needs a power boost. Shenron just gets an upgrade by Dende. The point is that this is something that's present in the entirety of Dragon Ball. But the character disguising these narrative beats is entertaining, and makes it known that a lot of this stuff is happening because he wants to go on a joyride. Other than his decisions and abilities that affect the plot, Neva stands as an amazing and badass addition to the Dragon Ball world and lore. He's the last standing and sole protector of the Namekian world in the Demon Realm, and I love how he pulled a fast one on Goma to continue fighting for his cause. While on the topic of Neva, let's mention the Tamagamis. These characters are different in that they don't have goals or aspirations that they proactively work for, rather they are automata that protect the Dragon Balls. They could have just made these three characters that have some sleek designs who do nothing but fight, but I feel like Toriyama and the production staff went above and beyond to make these guys memorable and effectively incorporate them into the plot. I love their expressiveness, and the minimal personality we do see is just enjoyable. The show also isn't afraid to pull off some gags with them, like number 2 telling Vegeta to go suck a teat, and then number 1 getting tossed around by Do, and I maintain that number 1's interaction with Neva before fighting Goma is one of the funniest in the show. On to the next one. Arinsu is another pretty tight Daima OG. It's fun to have a female antagonist in Dragon Ball who's taken rather seriously through and through, and almost wins in the end. The introduction of her character and just about all of her scenes tell us everything we gotta know about her. Her redemption is something that I think could have been fleshed out a bit more, but I think we do see enough of her interactions with Ku and Do for this to be believable. Her change of heart that stems from her being forced into this motherly position is fleshed out nicely by the story and is believable enough. Similar to Neva, she's a character that represents a lot of untapped and underdeveloped lore for Dragon Ball that then gets explored here. It's safe to say that she's one of the more memorable and better executed of Shin's siblings. But she also goes on further to explain the idea of witchcraft and potion brewing. Arinsu brought about the creation of Ku and Do, which in turn gave us monumental lore on Buu, lore which I think does nothing but add to the character. I love both the Majin brothers. Their designs, their interactions with each other, their relationship with Arinsu, and their interactions with the main cast, it's just all peak. The invoking of nostalgia from the pink blob himself, there's just so much to love about these two. Ku is the GOAT of Daima, and I think this version of having him defeat Goma gives the character and Daima as a whole personality. The characterization of Do by having him go on childish tantrums and do little victory dances was an effective way to explore him. I do think the context of the Majin Bros provides some of the biggest justification for the argument that there should have been more Dragon Ball characters in Daima, as seeing them interact with Buu himself would have been sweet. Overall though, I don't think I have much else to say about them. They're both delightful, and seeing these characters come off with an innocent demeanor introduced into modern Dragon Ball is certainly wholesome. Ibis is one of the funniest characters in all of Dragon Ball, and the fact that Charlie Dompler was secretly holding the most dangerous relic in the universe and unknowingly traded it for a cool hat is comedy gold. I love his design, he does ballet, and Mudwine, he's my goat. Oh, Goma. Goma. Goma is the main antagonist of Daima, and to be fully transparent, he is by far the most unorthodox when it comes to the modern Dragon Ball Rogues Gallery. And the word modern is doing a shit ton of work here, as I think the last antagonist that's reminiscent of Goma is Commander Red and the Red Ribbon Army from OG Dragon Ball. Fans have lambasted this little guy's design for the similarities to the warrior in gray, but like most things, I don't really mind this that much. Yes, both are wearing red and black leotards, and Goma does get this funny Mondo buff, but I just think that these criticisms aren't that serious. It would be much more egregious if Jiren and Goma were characters in the same series, or had more similarities to each other in terms of bodily design. Also, I want to quickly mention that I read this divot present in Goma's costume as being an M for Majin, compared to the Pride Trooper's uniform, which further differentiates these characters in my mind. But the real and important question regarding Goma is he a good antagonist? And I think the answer is, yeah, he's good enough. The best way I could describe Goma is that I don't think he rivals Moro and the Big Four from Z, but he is incorporated into the plot of Daima better than most of modern Dragon Ball antagonists. Unlike some others, he and Arinsu do drive the plot of Daima and set in some roadblocks for our protagonists. His motivation tracks, and this goofy, self-fulfilling failure he put himself in is quite the enjoyable downfall. After the start of the final battle, the extent of this reality warping is a unique sight that isn't reflected by many others. His domination of the Daima fighters in the final bout against Super Saiyan 4 holds some of the best visuals in the franchise. So what's up with him? Why am I hesitant to put him in the same tier as some of the greats? Well, the main reason is that I don't think Goma directly interacts with the Z fighters enough. Luckily, his presence can be felt throughout the show, and he never really feels forgotten. I just think a conversation or two with the Z fighters could have and would have pushed this character into the Z tier. One last thing I want to mention about Goma, and this is kind of unscripted, so hopefully this mini rant makes sense, is that Goma's abilities align with the progression of the villains of Z really nicely, and it's something I didn't really think about until after I've fully scripted this video. And by that what I mean is that Dragon Ball Z does this really cool thing where from Vegeta to Frieza, then Frieza to Cell, and then Cell to Buu, the abilities of the antagonists become greater and greater and more challenging and challenging. I kind of explained this in my Buu video, where like Buu, it was the ultimate antagonist with his abilities, right? He can copy any move, he has infinite regeneration, he could have done pretty much whatever. And Goma is supposed to be sort of the next step up above that. And I think they portray that pretty well. And it's kind of weird to say that Buu was the ultimate antagonist and then Goma is like the more ultimate villain with his abilities. But specifically, Buu does have rules that he is held candid to. Like, Buu's regeneration, we know, does have limits, and Buu cannot do pretty much anything he wants, but he's just on that cusp, where it seems that the power of the third eye can pretty much do anything. And this is even reflected in the fact that Goma doesn't get defeated. And in that regard, the way this character comes to be with his abilities, as well as his defeat, follows the awesome progression of Daima as a sequel to Dragon Ball Z. The second to last character I'm talking about is Goma's henchman, Degisu. Degisu is okay. Degisu is neither peak fiction, nor is he a plague to Daima. I think he does add enough to the story that without him there would be something that's missing. In the beginning, I was a fan of this guy, and I'm glad that at the start of the show, they weren't afraid to portray him as goofy as Goma. That being said, I probably would have preferred if he was alongside Goma through and through, or they would have committed a bit more to his portrayal and foreshadowed it a bit better. What we got was one of the few things in Daima that exists in a strange middle ground where they didn't really commit enough to an idea. They also could have afforded to let him have more interactions with his siblings, a critique that, at first glance, you could apply to all three of them, but it's obvious that Degisu was hurt the most by this decision. Regardless, I still like his relation to Shin and Arinsu, as the three are clearly distinct characters. While I'm on this point, I made a Zamasu joke earlier, and although the comparisons are obvious given that he's an evil Glind, I think all 7 of the important Glind to Daima and Super have unique enough designs and personalities to allow them to stand out from one another. And now we have the final and most bizarre set of characters I'm going to talk about, the Gendarmerie Force. Honestly, I have no clue what they were thinking with these guys. As I mentioned when talking about episodes 14 to 16, they have their funny moments and they do add a bit of lore to the world, but other than being a cool Ginyu Force homage, they do almost nothing and eat up way too much screen time. Like, there's a reality where these goobers were incorporated better into the story and managed to push the Z fighters a bit, or we get some sort of backstory and begin to understand why they were called, or they even have some interaction with Goma building to this formidable nature, or literally anything. But instead, they just kind of eat up some time. Now, I've heard that the Ginyu Force is a much bigger cultural phenomenon overseas, so I think it's very possible that some fans were satisfied enough with this in Daima. But I am not one of these people. Even though I am a big Ginyu Force fan, I just think this is kind of lazy. and they are one of the few things I think you can cut out entirely and little is lost. The final thing I want to talk about in regard to the characters original to Daima and the character section as a whole is that all of the Daima OG characters feel tonally consistent with one another and the entirety of Dragon Ball, which does nothing but add to the immersion of Daima as an extension of the original series. This tonal consistency, I believe, is present in both the designs and interactions of these characters. They properly reflect the worlds they come from, and that these worlds are different from one another and how they're used, and in some cases vary greatly from one another. Like, something to be appreciated is how King Kadon and Pansy interact with characters differently from a duo like Arinsu and Degasu. All four are from the Demon Realm, all four are presented in a manner that makes them feel like new additions to the franchise, but there's also room for them to contrast with one another, making the Demon Realm feel more diverse. And overall, I think Daima handles these characters perfectly. I'm rooting for them through and through. I don't really hate any of them. Some of them could have been better, sure, but none of them are particularly bad. I don't see a Daima character and then frown. I don't see an interaction of these main characters and then get upset. I see nothing but positives from almost everything here. Now that the discussion of Daima's plot and characters are mostly out of the way, I believe a good segue that leads us back to the thesis of this video would be a comparative segment between Dragon Ball Daima and Dragon Ball GT. To be clear, this isn't so much a segment on which one is better, as that will be immediately after. Rather, this is going over what elements Daima borrows from GT and how it delivers on said elements. Now, on a conceptual level, Daima is incredibly similar to GT's first arc, the Black Star Dragon Ball Saga. Both stories involve the main characters getting turned into a child, and then Goku and the gang have to go retrieve a set of Dragon Balls to wish them back. While on this quest, they meet a diverse cast of characters and visit an array of settings foreign to them. Daima paying homage to this arc of GT is rather ironic, considering that this arc of GT is supposed to be reminiscent of the first saga of the original series, meaning that Daima is an homage of an homage of an homage. In terms of execution of these things, it's abundantly clear that Daima stands on its own as a story independent from these facts. While there are extrapolations to be made regarding these similarities, the execution couldn't be more different. For example, both the Daima fighters and the GT trio meet characters from different realms, but Daima has them join the crew and become main characters as compared to GT, which has them operate as minor antagonists. The climax of the Black Star Dragon Ball Saga has its roots in Z's sci-fi era, while Daima is fantasy through and through. The Black Star Dragon Ball Saga is a slow burn as the opener of GT, while Daima is a fully fledged story that is concluded within a similar amount of time. Daima takes elements of some massive GT-isms including Super Saiyan 4, Ultimate Shenron, and a main character becoming a child, but it twists all of these to further differentiate itself. To start with the least controversial one, Ultimate Purunga is cool as hell. With his introduction late into the run of Daima, it's clear that what the series was going for in relation to GT before this moment, but his presence acts as a heartwarming bow to this gift. One of the smartest decisions Toriyama and the staff could have made is having all the cast be turned into children as compared to just Goku. This isn't even to discredit GT, it's just to say that it's clear Daima did this to separate it further from its predecessor and took this concept to a bit more of an extreme. Furthermore, if it wasn't clear already, I do believe this helps Daima's plot in the long run, with part of its peak climax being attributed to this thread being paid off. And let's talk about it. Daima Super Saiyan 4 versus GT Super Saiyan 4. Both forms are incredibly similar in appearance. The main difference is the color of Goku's hair. The hair on his body is a more scarlet than pink, while the hair on his head has more pinkish hues, as compared to the black. We see there are added divots of hair on his chest. The tail returns in both instances, and it seems that Daima Super Saiyan 4 accounts for the lack of shirt, as compared to GT's dematerializing. At least, kind of. A much appreciated similarity between both forms is the golden aura. In both instances, I believe it really ties Super Saiyan 4's design, as it does look incredibly different from the three before it at first glance, but the golden aura acts as a through line, indicating continuity with the other Super Saiyan forms. The only other notable design change from Daima Super Saiyan 4 is Goku's monkey arms. His forearms down are much bigger and disproportionate with his body, and I gotta say, this rules. GT Super Saiyan 4 brings about this primal feeling in stature, but honestly I think it's most pertinent when comparing Goku to the other Saiyans. Like, look at how he towers over these other characters in these scenes. But Daima Super Saiyan 4 manages to convey this just through design alone. It really brings together the monkey aesthetic they were going for. Speaking of monkey aesthetics, one of my favorite elements of Daima Super Saiyan 4 is how it changes the way Goku fights. When he's in his mini version, we see him pounce on all fours, and when he's big, it does seem that he has the supreme might about him. This is related to another element of GT Super Saiyan 4 that is a bit different, that being Goku's primal urges that he seems to be resisting when he's using the form. Debatably, the biggest difference between GT and Daima's SS4 is the way these forms come to be. Specifically, we know for a fact that GT Super Saiyan 4 is an evolution of the Great Ape form, while Daima's is an evolution of Super Saiyan 3. This is seen in how Goku goes from 3 to 4 in both transformation sequences, and when he de-transforms due to Goma's power, Goku goes from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 to base. Honestly, this change is minute and doesn't take anything away from either conception of the form. A really cool but probably unintentional connection I made to Daima Super Saiyan 4 is that it's reminiscent of the anime sequence when Goku goes Super Saiyan 3, and we see the giant ape roar as Goku reverts back to his baby self, representing the parallels between how far he's come in terms of both strength and personal growth. A connection that probably is more intentional and makes this progression of power seem more logical is that original conceptions of Super Saiyan 3 involved the Saiyan tail, meaning that the monkey side of things have probably always been here, and Super Saiyan 4 marks the new personification of this peak. Speaking of peak, by far the peak of Daima Super Saiyan 4 is its presentation. This form has so much aura, both figuratively and literally. The contrasting moments of explosive power and ultimate serenity come off so seamlessly in Goku's bout with Goma. The way Goku on multiple moments envelops the battleground in his power is just so fucking peak. And look at him standing on the rock. It's just so cool! Anyway, let's shift to a potential critique of Daima Super Saiyan 4. How Goku unlocked the transformation. Was it bullshitted? No. No, it wasn't. Yes, I understand why people are upset that Neva was the one that was like the key to unlocking this form. But if you look at it of the narrative context of both of these characters, this makes perfect sense. I already went on my tirade about how Neva and the Namekians in Dragon Ball can just do shit, and this seems to be like one of those instances. This is something that becomes much more understandable and logical when you consider that A, Neva performs a similar ritual to buff Tamagami 2, and B, it gets revealed that Goku was training for the form and was already on the cusp of completing it. If this is something you don't like, that's fine. But you can't say it doesn't make any sense. Compare this to GT Super Saiyan 4 and I'll say this. The sequence in which Goku initially goes Super Saiyan 4 is peak, albeit silly, considering how he gets his tail back. Meanwhile, Vegeta's is damn near the exact same in that it's almost entirely credited to another character pulling some strings. For any stragglers that still hate on this form, they may remind you that the execution of Daima Super Saiyan 4 is much better than other examples of modern Dragon Ball forms, which come out of nowhere and get little to no explanation for their existence. Okay, so this is hopefully the last post-editing, Tough Man segment here. And that's about the presentation of Daima Super Saiyan 4. I know I read somewhere that the point of Super Saiyan 4 having these blue hues and this white wispy aura was to contrast and give it this watery look that was supposed to contrast with the fiery explosiveness of the power, which represents Goku's balance at this point of his journey. And I think if you decide to take this into reality, it makes the form much, 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 much more deliberate and what it's doing with its flashiness. And this is something that's even reflected in a lot of the scenes with Super Saiyan 4, specifically the Kamehameha scene, the way that Goku powers up explosively, and then, just the calm serenity of the form. Just the ultimate balance of Goku's character is reflected in Super Saiyan 4, and I gotta say, it's just, dude, it's so fucking cool. With talking about Daima Super Saiyan 4 and the way it delivers its GT-isms, we can now ask the question, is Daima better than the Grand Tour? Now, for sure, it is not a controversial statement to say that Daima clears the Black Star Dragon Ball saga. Daima is a more complete story, it has higher highs, fewer lows, and it clears in terms of both pacing and animation. Daima just clears. But the real question is, do I think Daima clears the rest of GT in terms of its quality? Yes, I do. Now, to be clear, GT is a good Dragon Ball sequel, and that it properly expands upon the world and the characters. It has cool designs for its new characters, and the ones that stem from the OG series feel right at home with their previous characterizations, just like Daima. Where GT completely and utterly fails on is its utilization of the broader cast of characters, its pacing, and the execution of these amazing concepts. Let's start with the easiest to see of these three, the pacing. As I mentioned previously, the first 20 episodes of GT barely get the ball rolling on the series. Many fans of GT, including myself, believe that it starts becoming a great show with the Baby Saga and when Super Saiyan 4 is introduced. This is for a plethora of reasons that can be described by saying that it mitigates a lot of these critiques I've raised. But Baby isn't introduced until episode 22, and Super Saiyan 4 doesn't make its debut until episode 35. Even including the Baby Saga, much of GT is paced horrendously slow, giving a lot of story beats to episode arcs that really could be collapsed into one. Moving on to something that's a bit more subjective is the execution of its own concepts. This can be seen in a lot of areas of GT, but I think it's best displayed in its last two sagas. The Super 17 arc is regarded as one of the worst by fans, which is crazy because I feel like if you read out the synopsis of someone who just finished Z and its films, they'd ask, how could they possibly mess this up? Super 17 is a bland antagonist, and they do almost nothing with the idea of all the antagonists coming back. There's hardly any cool interactions between them and the heroes and the antagonists where they comment on their growth. The most compelling stuff was with Android 18 and then Frieza and Cell and Hell, but the latter is short-lived and the former gets immediately squashed with Android 17 being a silent antagonist. For some reason. They took one of the most bratty, talkative, and charismatic Dragon Ball antagonists and made him this silent threat. To pivot, as much as it pains me to say it, the Shadow Dragon Saga is a victim of this as well. I stand by what I said in my Dragon Balls video, and that this is probably the most creative thing the franchise has ever done with the Dragon Balls, and is conceptually one of the greatest ideas to come from the series. But the way this arc is structured, in tandem with the characters, in tandem with the pacing, results in a watch that's just boring. Finally getting to the Dragon Ball cast, there was an old bit that GT stood for Goku time, as with the exception of the final episodes of the final saga, Goku does literally everything in this series in terms of driving the plot and fighting antagonists. There are maybe 2 moments from GT that are unequivocally cool that don't involve Goku in any way. Even Vegeta takes the backseat to him literally this entire show besides the Shadow Dragon Saga. And before any of you call me a hypocrite for not scrutinizing Daima like this, may I remind you that GT is over 3 times the length of Daima, and I would still argue that Daima better uses the cast than GT. The reason why I bring this up during the Shadow Dragon Saga is that they had the perfect opportunity to involve other fighters like Trunks, Gohan, Oob, and Goten. The Shadow Dragons were all over Earth, so to have the Z Fighters split up and take them out and have their own fights all at the same time, Culling Game style, would have been really cool. But no. Goku does the whole thing by himself. And Pan follows him for some reason. Okay. Another big critique when comparing these series is that, unlike Daima, GT is tonally inconsistent. And I don't just mean like comparing the tone of the Black Star Dragon Ball Saga with other arcs. Even in its story that it's equivalent to Daima, there's a lot of issues. The flow between goofy Dragon Ball antics and peak Z fights just don't come off as naturally as they do in Daima. Now, I need to give GT this. GT is Dragon Ball. GT feels like a heartfelt sequel to Z. It fleshes out the world and concepts given to it from its predecessor pretty well. There is so much lore to GT, and the characters feel like their original counterparts. But a sequel show needs to be more than just a good sequel. It needs to be a good show, which is where I think GT falls flat. On April 1st, 2000, Nickelodeon premiered the 19th episode of the first season of SpongeBob SquarePants. While the first segment featured the now popular Fools in April, whose main conflict involved the Sponge's co-worker taking an April Fool's prank a bit too far, the segment relevant for this video is the one that followed, Neptune's Spatula. The plot of this episode involves SpongeBob enacting the Arthurian feat of pulling Neptune's spatula out of some grease. This summons the mythical King Neptune who, upon seeing SpongeBob's squishy exterior, refuses to believe he is the one who nabbed the spatula. This causes Neptune to challenge SpongeBob to a fry cook-off, in which, if SpongeBob wins, he can join Neptune in the Kingdom of Atlantis as a god. During their games, it's clear that Neptune is the more efficient cook, with him using his divine powers to make 1,000 patties in the time it took SpongeBob to make just 1. But once Neptune eats SpongeBob's singular burger, he realizes that it tastes far better than his own due to the amount of care and effort SpongeBob put into making the singular sandwich. And I literally could not better explain the relationship between Dragon Ball Daima and Dragon Ball Super than the plot synopsis of this SpongeBob episode. Oh Super, where do we begin? Dragon Ball Super is pretty much the face of modern Dragon Ball and has so much going into it, so I'm going to be breaking it down into chunks. During its first section of this video, I'll be referring to the anime's rendition of Battle of Gods to the Tournament of Power. Then I'll be going over the manga's take on these arcs briefly, then the manga exclusive arcs, and ending with its 2 films. The Battle of Gods movie is pretty good. Notice how I said the movie, because of the 3 tellings of the story, this one is by far the best. It's poignant, reintroduces the extended Dragon Ball cast, Beerus is a fun antagonist, God Goku versus Beerus is a pretty fight, and the climax involving the I will not let you destroy my world line and what follows is peak Dragon Ball. The anime arc, on the other hand, is bloated and removes most of the charm of the film. It's not the worst arc told in Dragon Ball, given that the conceptual ideas that made the movie great are still present, but the presentation on almost all fronts is far worse than the film. Resurrection F is not a good movie. In fact, I would call it a mid-movie and a bad arc. Frieza coming back isn't inherently bad, but they break shockingly little ground with him, and the fact that the Z-Fighters win because Whis wills it to be so is just silly. I could keep going, but there's nothing to say about Resurrection F that's valuable to this video, as there's probably 3 Dragon Ball fans who would think it's better than Daima. The arc is ugly and bloated just like Battle of Gods. Frieza does almost nothing, this starts the downward trend of Goku and Vegeta's character arcs, and the ending is just nothing short of insulting. The Universe 6 tournament is underrated, but only because people write it off as being downright bad, but I think it's mid. Given its smaller cast, there is time to flesh out the Universe 6 fighters and the relationship to the Warriors of Universe 7, and this is done well enough. Seeing Vegeta formally take on a mentee is one of the best places they take his character in the series, and Kaba bounces off Vegeta, Goku, and his compatriots. Goku vs. Hit is a badass fight, and at this point deserves the underrated title as no one really brings it up when talking about Super's accolades. The way that Kaioken is brought back into the story is pretty peak and aligns with the characterization of Super Saiyan Blue. But this arc doesn't really break new ground for Dragon Ball, and it's honestly the most unengaging tournament arc in the franchise. Like, the only truly hype fight of this arc is Goku vs. Hit, which is pretty good, but by no means does it have the prowess to carry an entire saga. It's not that the others don't have their moments, because they certainly do, they just don't reach that high, which is disappointing. In terms of story, it's perfectly fine. Like, I don't have too many grievances with it, other than I'm not a fan about how they write off both Piccolo and Buu. It just seemed a bit unnecessary. Beerus and Champa's relationship is cute, and seeing Hit and Goku refuse to be their pawns towards the end is peak. But how does it compare to Daima? Honestly, I just think Daima has higher, more consistent highs than this saga. Like, this isn't a matter of like one being flawless and the other being trash on a conceptual level. I just think the Universe 6 arc doesn't do anything great like Daima does. Both are similar in that they flesh out the Dragon Ball verse and do some useful character studies on the ones they are introducing. But Daima just goes further in this regard and has a densely richer plot than the Universe 6 saga. If I were to give Universe 6 anything over Daima, it would probably be Goku's relationship with Hit as an individual main antagonist. But, as I'll soon go over, Daima does very similar stuff, just in other areas. Now here's where people start calling for my execution. People are going to start calling for my head on a pike. It's fine by me, because I'm going to say it. The Future Trunks saga is in contention for the most overrated story ever told in Dragon Ball. Yeah, I said it. I said it, and my ass is not taking it back. Goku Black and Zamasu are peak villains. Their plan and disdain for mortals takes advantage of so many elements of this realm of Dragon Ball, aka the themes of godliness, blending with other universes, blending with time travel. Both of their designs are peak, their moveset is familiar but new. This arc features the return of Future Trunks and Vegito, who, may I remind you, is the mascot of my channel. With their backs against the wall, the Zamasu duo fuse, it's so cool. Trunks has got this cool sword and he's doing the cool thing and he killed Zamasu and the arc is over and that's the end. Except it's not. Yeah, I despise the ending of this arc with every fiber of my being. The fact that Zamasu pretty much wins and becomes the universe is extremely intimidating and horrifying, but with Goku using the I win button that leads to the eradication of Trunks' entire timeline, it forces me to ask, what the hell was the point of any of that? No joke, this ending is so atrocious that I think it ruins the entire saga. Not only does Trunks' entire world get eradicated, but they just like send him to a different one. Like, no joke, what the hell was anyone thinking when they did this? The fact that Trunks doesn't stay in the cast means that if you skipped this saga and went straight from Universe 6 to the Tournament of Power, you'd miss literally nothing. If you widen the scope of Super, the only thing the Future Trunks arc does is give Goku and Vegeta a power-up. Not even a new form, a power-up. The ramifications of this arc could be replaced by a singular episode that says Goku and Vegeta trained. There are no new lessons learned, there is one new addition to the main cast who ends up contributing nothing that could have already been achieved, there are no forms unlocked, no greater impact on Goku and Vegeta, nothing. And somehow, people think this is peak Dragon Ball. I get it to an extent. Vegito Blue is awesome, and at this point, episodes 56 and 66 are the best Super has looked up until this point. But those nuggets of peak contribute to what ultimately ends up being an utterly worthless story. And I know what some of you guys might be thinking, but tough man, the point is the tragedy of it all. No, it's not. You know it's not. You know that is not, you know that this is supposed to be the happy ending for the Trunks character. Everyone Trunks and Mai loved is dead, and it's all okay because they're going to another reality where they're alive. This is, honest to God, probably the most insulting narrative decision in all of Dragon Ball. And because of that, there's no way in hell it compares to Daima in the absolute slightest. The Tournament of Power, or Universal Survival Saga, is the only arc of Super's first 5 that I think has merit to be in a conversation with Daima. Super finally found its identity here, and this is the only animated arc that I would say takes well advantage of Dragon Ball's ensemble. They make a strong team of 10, or I guess 9, and they manage to make creative team-ups, exploring the proper potential of this arc. The saga is like a Dragon Ball's greatest hits, as there is so many moments that are clearly meant to be taken as callbacks and homages to previous scenes from the series. But this isn't necessarily a bad thing, since there is a bit more creativity put into it than just a slideshow from one highlight reel to another. I also think I speak for mostly everyone when I say that most, if not all, of Super's top moments happen in this saga. Ultra Instinct is peak. Blue Evolution is less peak, but still cool. God Topo is a cool antagonist. Kefla and the Universe 6 Saiyans are a fun addition to the world, if you view them charitably. And the climax with Goku and Frieza throwing Jiren off is some of the most primal, raw, monkey brain, hype shit in the entire franchise. That being said, the Tournament of Power is not flawless. Its pacing is subpar at best, and there are admittedly a lot of episodes that could have been rewritten if not outright cut. Also, the Rogues Gallery here is inconsistent. Jiren is almost a universally hated antagonist, and while I don't think I hate him, I think they dropped the ball with his characterization towards the end. A lot of the side antagonists are forgettable and then just don't have that intimate of stories with the Z Fighters. The TOP also has a rather generic ending, which on its own is totally fine considering that the ending is foreshadowed and the themes of the story are present throughout. But there are some odd moments that imply/insinuate a deeper story involving disdain and disagreement towards the deities for what's going on, but none of that goes anywhere. Compared to Daima, which pretty much has minimal flaws in these realms, Daima is also much more consistent visually than the Tournament of Power. While I do think the Super anime is varied in quality and does have some parts that are peak Dragon Ball, I do think there are some things about Super that kneecap it at a fundamental level, qualities that just aren't present in Daima. The elephant in the room is the animation and the pacing of its arcs. It's really hard to take Super seriously when its first 27 episodes are just reused Dragon Ball content that add shockingly little to enhance the story. On top of that, Super's very jank animation and bland art style fails to find any morsel of a unique identity until the Tournament of Power, which makes Super an incredibly bland watch for at least the first half of its run. To be clear, I am not being hyperbolic here, nor am I rage baiting. There is not a singular episode of Dragon Ball Super pre-Tournament of Power that looks better than any single episode from Daima. Even including the Tournament of Power, there are maybe 5 or 6 episodes that come to my mind that hold a candle to Daima's visuals. Another problem with Super that I don't think is shared with Daima is the handling of the Dragon Ball cast. While yes, Super does utilize the cast more and that the broader Dragon Ball ensemble is more present, I don't think they are effectively used. Even then, there is only one saga that uses Dragon Ball's cast to any noticeable degree, being the Tournament of Power. This is something that's notably egregious when we consider that Super eclipses Daima's run 6 times over, meaning that it had more than enough time to better use the cast. I'll give Super this: it expands upon characters like Krillin, Piccolo, 17, and Roshi more effectively than Daima, and this is because all but one of them are just absent in Daima's run. But there are so many characters that Super just absolutely butchers. Goku, dangerous idiot who's lost all of his charm. Vegeta reverts back to only wanting to beat Goku. Future Trunks reverts back to begging for help from his dad. Gohan goes through his character arc in Z twice. Chi-Chi reverts back to being super strict for no reason. Frieza comes back. They do nothing creative with this at first. Ten Shinhan, nothing. Goten and Trunks, nothing. Yamcha, nothing. Boo, nothing. And I understand that a lot of these apply to Daima as well, but this is the last time I'm going to say it, if Daima committed to doing this, it would quickly lose its concise and tightly written plot. Super does have some good additions to the cast, but it seems for every good addition, there's one that's either downright bad or controversial at best. Like, Goku Black and Zamasu are a pretty great villain duo, but then right after them came Jiren. Beerus and Whis started as cool mythical additions and contrasted with the Z-Fighters nicely, but then turned into inconsistent one-note characters who take away all the stakes present in the stories. Hit is cool conceptually, and so is Kaba and not Frieza, but right next to them are Botamo and Magetta. Compare this to the consistent quality of Glorio and Pansy, and how well Goma, the Majins, and Shin's siblings contribute to Daima's overall tone and story. The last thing to mention about Super vs. Daima is the world building. Another non-hyperbolic statement I got loaded in the chamber is that I believe Daima in its 20 episodes adds more rich and dense lore to the Dragon Ball mythos than the entirety of Super. Unlike Daima, Super adds a lot of stuff that just seems kind of empty. Like, yeah, it adds the 12 universes and their deities alongside them, but we know shockingly little about most of these worlds. The gods, in addition to the Pantheon, get almost nothing explored about them. We get names, and we understand the premise of the role within the world, and most of the designs are fun, but outside of the Tournament of Power, they just don't do a lot. To give Super some credit, it does justify its existence and the existence of these characters, and that 4 of its 5 animated arcs do directly relate to its divine theme and extension of the world. But I just think there's little substance to the moments that do explore these elements. The Super manga is an interesting case. It's by far the most underrated and under-the-radar sequel to Z, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there are still a good handful of fans that just assume that these stories are the same as these stories. To quickly recap the first 5 sagas, I'll say this. Battle of Gods is much shorter in the manga and nothing special. Resurrection F is skipped entirely. Universe 6 is certainly not bad, but still nothing special. The Goku Black Saga has some cool and unique twists from its anime counterpart, but fundamentally has the same shit ending. And the Tournament of Power is one of the most frustrating and poorly paced arcs in all of Dragon Ball. So no, none of them cleared Daima. But now, let's talk about my baby. Oh, Moro, I love you. I love this saga. It is without a shadow of a doubt the best arc from Super. It is the most similar to the OG sagas of Z. If you haven't seen my video on him, I do believe Moro is one of the best Dragon Ball antagonists and is unequivocally a criteria that clears Daima. Moro is such a well-written and formidable villain that literally and figuratively eats up every scene he's in. The Moro saga also uses the Dragon Ball cast masterfully. Not only do the extra Z fighters have little fight scenes and moments, but they are integral to the finale. The saga commits to Super's character arcs and stories that were set up beforehand. It does seem like a natural progression for not only Goku and Vegeta, but also for Gohan, Piccolo, Roshi, the androids, and my boy Boo. It also explores Super original characters like Whis and his family. Myrus is an addition to Super's cast that not only manages to naturally flesh out the world of Super, but also challenges the story's norms and status quo. So is it better than Daima? Honestly, I don't know. I think for me, this is going to come down to whichever one I feel more charitable towards in the moment. Like, yeah, Moro is a better antagonist than Goma, and the saga uses Dragon Ball's ensemble better than Daima, but Daima is probably paced better, has some peak visuals, and is more entrenched in effective world building and character exploration than the GOAT of Super. Both stories have their merits as continuations of Dragon Ball, and do manage to effectively grow this franchise. Oh, Granola. This saga. This is actually one of my first official statements about this saga on this channel. The Granola Saga was really good and was on track to be one of the greats, but I think it fumbled towards the latter half of its run. Oh wait, it turns out I did make an official statement in my now outdated video about all the Dragon Balls, in which I stated that I hated Bardock's Wish. Well, a year and a half later, and I still hate Bardock's Wish. The Granola Saga is not the worst story ever told in Dragon Ball, but it is by far from the best. Unlike Moro or a saga like Resurrection F, it's not all bad, nor is it all good. It's not even all mid. Granola just has some really high highs for modern Dragon Ball, but also some of the lowest of lows. To talk about some pros, Vegeta's story and relationship with Granola is well executed. The introduction of Ultra Ego is badass. The saga has some of the best fight scenes and sets in all of Super. This is where Toyotaro's arc really becomes peak of the peak, and that alone makes it a good read. The emotions of this arc are felt through and through, and there are some unique character designs courtesy of the GOAT and his also but less goated apprentice. The setup for the conflict is well executed, and the 4D chess being played by the Heaters is something that you're just waiting to see unraveled. But that's where most of the outstanding pros end. The problems with the saga stem from the execution of its story beats and its bizarre pacing. This arc did try something unique, and that the entire manga saga is a focused character study on like 5 characters who do nothing but fight throughout the entirety of it. While in theory this is a creative take for Dragon Ball, obviously outside of a tournament setting, in different standalone contexts, it could have worked great. But when looked at through the lens of all of Super, this saga seems rather meaningless and certainly redundant. Like, if the focus was supposed to be on the Saiyans and Goku and Vegeta, then that's totally fine, but every saga up until this point within Super has focused almost entirely on these two. Not only that, but 2 sagas ago, there was a story that came out whose entire purpose was to flesh out and explore the history of Goku and Vegeta's Saiyan heritage. In regard to the pacing, this arc becomes a slog towards the end, with all 4 main characters just refusing to go down, and the formula gets repetitive pretty quickly. Something I need to mention is the atrocious ending and the execution of the heaters. While I was seething with Black Frieza when the chapter first came out, I can understand why people like this, but what I think is much more egregious is how Elec goes out without doing almost anything meaningful, and Gas just getting one shot. Like there was no payoff to anything regarding this group of antagonists, which is a shame, as Elec could have gone down as one of the most unique and interesting villains in Dragon Ball. And I feel like with these things in mind, I don't even have to explain why I think Daima is superior. You guys already know why. All these problems in Granola just aren't present in Daima. And before we leave the Super manga and its really high highs, there is one looming factor that needs to be addressed. This is still Dragon Ball Super. And I'm not saying that to say Super can never be good, or that Super is fundamentally bad. Rather, there is an element of Super's narrative that I believe to be an overall con that is still present within both Moro and Granola. That being Super Goku and Vegeta. While both are at their best in these arcs, and it's clear that Toyotaro knows what he's doing with them, for whatever reason, they still go through these character arcs that overall seem unnecessary and unattached from their OG Z counterparts. To provide an example in both sagas, in my video about Moro himself, I mentioned Goku's insecurity with Ultra Instinct and how this victory was his. Within the context of the Moro saga and Super, this is a natural progression of the character. But when compared to Goku's characterization in Z, doesn't this just seem like a strange direction to take him? Like, has a problem with Goku ever been his insecurity? Granola is even stranger in my opinion, as the return of Bardock and his impact on the Saiyans is just so bizarre. On a fundamental level, it's strange to connect this father-son duo when Goku is literally in his mid-40s. This is also the 3rd, maybe 4th arc of Dragon Ball, and the 2nd in Super, where Goku commits to reconnecting with his Saiyan roots, and once again acting as a redundant place to take the character. And Vegeta feeling this sentimental bond towards Bardock, or the reveal that he knew that he was his father, is just weird. Overall though, both sagas have a lot of merit and are worth checking out. They just have fundamental flaws that are just absent in Daima. With me now fully showing my true colors regarding my feelings of Dragon Ball Super, let's end this comparative segment by addressing Super's 2 films. Dragon Ball Super Broly is a pretty good movie. The reimagining of the Saiyan history on the big screen is magical. I do not hate Super Goku and Vegeta in this movie. This take on Broly is not intrinsically better than the peak demon that was Z Broly, but he does a pretty good job at being an antagonist who is clearly bound for a redemption arc. I like Paragus and Broly's redesign. Seeing the more intricacies of Frieza's army is always fun. Both of these pieces of media are on par with each other in terms of visuals. This is by far the best of modern Dragon Ball aesthetically. Daima and Broly are masterclasses in animation and musical score. They also both featured 10 out of 10 fights, with Daima having Super Saiyan 4 versus Goma, and Broly having his bout with Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta. Both as additions to the Dragon Ball franchise officialized/canonized, and I use that term very loosely, elements of Dragon Ball that fans have been asking for literal decades. None of these additions from either story seem lazy or haphazardly thrown in there. There was clearly an effort to make sure it aligned with everything that came before it. All of these factors in conjunction with one another make it so that for me, Broly is the 3rd best story in modern Dragon Ball, behind only Moro and Daima. I think an easy category to see where Daima outshines Broly is its characters. And I don't mean Goku and Vegeta. I mean the original Daima cast are just such a strong group that add personality to the series that Broly, the film, doesn't replicate as effectively. Chilai and Lemo are fun additions, and I'm glad they're there, but the movie doesn't do enough of them to fully flesh them out. Along with that, Daima has the benefit of standing as a full series, so it meaningfully and expertly pulls off world-building moments and multiple running plot lines. While the fact that Daima is a show whilst Broly is a film does not make one intrinsically better than the other, I just believe the areas where Daima has the abilities to succeed does so much better and clearly than where Broly has the opportunities to succeed. And with that, we've reached the last and previous most recently completed story in modern Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball Super, Superhero.
You serious?
Okay, if you want to have an actual conversation about Daima versus Superhero, I can have one. Let's do it. No matter how you splice it, I believe that in just about every possible regard and every possible metric, Daima is a better piece of media than Dragon Ball Super Superhero. With the exception of one hyper-specific scale, I do believe Superhero handles the character of Piccolo better than Daima. I think Daima handles Piccolo poorly and that he is severely underutilized, while Superhero brings him full circle with his relationship with Shenron to give him a massive power-up capable of rivaling Goku and Vegeta, which I gotta admit is pretty cool. With that said though, this is, if I'm being charitable towards the film, as Superhero does not handle Piccolo perfectly, and I think it's a huge misstep to have him force Gohan back into fighting for the sake of having Gohan do stuff. Oh, by the way, Gohan sucks in this movie. His arc, if you want to call it that, is the third time this has been done in Super alone. It is the fourth time he's done it if you count Z. Making Gohan a shit dad who depends on Piccolo to raise his kid is so infuriating. Gamma 1 and 2 are the only cool original characters with unique designs and personalities to match. Cell Max is the worst Dragon Ball antagonist, and the Red Ribbon Army coming back for the third time is just awful and boring at this point in the franchise. Stupid Super Goku is in this film, debatably at his dumbest. Broly comes back but doesn't do shit. The B-plot is, in most instances, looks awful. Why is Whis purple? Why does Beast Gohan look like Super Saiyan 2 Kid Gohan? What is the Beast form? We don't know, and we still don't know. Superhero does feature a bit of the Dragon Ball cast, but it's not like any of them other than Piccolo and Pan do anything meaningful or memorable. The manga arc does admittedly fix a few of these glaring issues, but it doesn't change the fact that on a conceptual level, Superhero is a lazy retread that's a pathetic excuse of a Dragon Ball arc, and having it in the same conversation as Daima, or hell, arcs like Moro, Granola, and Broly is just insulting to those stories. And we've done it. We've gone over all of Daima, why it's peak, and even compared it to all of its contemporaries. So why are we still here? Well, with all the praise I've given Daima, and the fact that I think it is by far the best Dragon Ball has been in a while, there are still questions left unanswered. Mainly being, why is there so much hate for the series? Why have many Dragon Ball fans written it off entirely, and maintain that it gets cleared by a lot of modern Dragon Ball? Well, I think the biggest thing that led to Daima getting critiqued heavily by the Dragon Ball fandom is the fandom's own warped expectations of what the show was going to be. When people heard that there was going to be a new Dragon Ball show, they thought we were going to get something akin to Dragon Ball Super, which is clearly inspired by the titanic clashes and muscle-bound battles from Z. Something Daima clearly is not, at least not in its entirety. And when they didn't get that, they were disappointed. I think this, in tandem with the premise of Daima, caused a lot of fans to not even give it a shot, essentially getting filtered by the goofy nature of the show. And to be clear, I understand this to an extent. Daima's premise is not only a silly pivot for modern Dragon Ball that I think might have thrown people off who weren't used to seeing such antics, but it could also be viewed as a needless retread as Dragon Ball has explored this idea before, and for a lot of people, GT is still the black sheep of the Dragon Ball franchise that horribly failed at executing this properly. While I wasn't upset with the silly tone of Daima, I was hesitant about its quality going into it given Super's track record, but I still gave it a chance, and I think it's amazing. And I know it's bold and rather audacious of me, a singular guy, a singular reviewer, to point at thousands of Dragon Ball fans and go, no, you're all wrong and I'm right because I like the show and you don't. But I hope we can all understand, especially those who've made it this far into the video, that my views are a bit more nuanced than that, and I'm not trying to tout my opinion as the ultimate one. I'm essentially saying that I think a majority of Dragon Ball fans who shit on Daima and call it a bad show are acting in bad faith, as they either haven't seen it and are blindly hating, or have seen it and are upset that it wasn't Dragon Ball Super 2. Something it was never supposed to be, and something it was never advertised to be. There is the secret third category of haters that I mentioned earlier in the video, and these are fans who give Daima shit for its narrative decisions, but then fail to see that a lot of the critiques they give are ones that apply to most of the Dragon Ball franchise. I went over this in my sections about pacing, Neva, and then sort of the execution of Super Saiyan 4 compared to other Dragon Ball forms, and the point of me bringing this up consistently is to drive home the point that this is something that has always existed. Daima is breaking new ground, but at its heart it is a return to form for Dragon Ball. And if you truly think that these criticisms are detrimental to Daima, that's totally fine, but you have to stay consistent in your views and apply this scrutiny to similar instances in the Dragon Ball franchise. And if you don't want to do that, then I'll encourage you to view Daima in a more charitable light. By far, one of the most annoying criticisms I've received is people thinking that Daima got good only after Super Saiyan 4 was reintroduced. It's pretty obvious why some folks think this, and if you think this by itself, all the power to you, you're entitled to believe that. But what really pisses me off about this view is that folks would then go on to say that the rest of Daima is worthless and say that its defenders are being dishonest. While not my only motivation for delivering this review in this manner, Part of the reason why I decided to go into so much detail about every episode is to support the fact that Daima has so much to offer throughout the entirety of its run, and that it's not just bullshit for 16 episodes and then a peak finale with the funny Monkey Man. It's a heartfelt, fully fleshed out story with hype through and through. And I hope that, to a certain extent, I was able to convince staunch critics to at least reconsider or even check out the show again with this stuff in mind. If I were to ask you, what's Dragon Ball about? How would you describe it? What themes or through lines would you highlight? Would you highlight its shonen elements and climactic fights? What about its adventure elements and heartwarming characters? Is it a story about nature versus nurture? Is it sci-fi or is it fantasy? Dragon Ball is the story of Son Goku. Specifically, it is a story about how a little monkey boy, through his pure heart and strong conviction, manages to change and grow those around him. This is something that literally every Dragon Ball series knocks out of the ballpark. The original series features Goku making new friends and acting as the glue that binds them together. His adventures with Krillin and Bulma cause the three of them to grow closer, and through his martial prowess, he represents the hope for the next generation. His sparing of Piccolo was what led to his cleansing into one of Earth's greatest heroes. Z acts as a seamless transition into this, with Goku acting as the antithesis to Vegeta's birthright and Frieza's tyranny, the former of which comes to accept this and is better because of it, while the latter refuses and dies. The Cell and Buu sagas follow through with this, with the Z Fighters having a positive impact on the likes of Hercule and the androids, the world champion who was then pivotal to Buu's defeat and redemption arc. GT understood the assignment, as Goku, Trunks, and Pan travel the universe. Goku doesn't go through any explicit character arc, but through his positive interactions with others, he manages to defeat the evil that is Omega Shenron. Super handles this extraordinarily well and might even be better than GT in this regard. Through Goku's indomitable spirit, he manages to sway the will of the gods. He confronts a dogmatic assassin and convinces him to improve for improvement's sake. When taking on the personification of the wall that must be passed, Goku challenges his isolation and convinces him that maybe it's okay to let others in. But no story in the franchise does this as seamlessly and magically as Dragon Ball Daima. Daima does such a wondrous job at explaining the inadequacy of the Demon Realm when it comes to taking care of its citizens and Goma subjects. The third Demon Realm features air that is thick and hard to maneuver through. The wasteland is treacherous with bandits roaming the lawless plains. People are constantly at each other's throats. There is an oppressive police force whose mission is to do nothing but uphold the power of their supreme king. When their subjects refuse to submit, their literal life force is drained from them. Our demonic protagonist starts the story resembling something far from a hero. He plans to use the Z-Fighters for nothing but his own personal gain and a paycheck. It's not that he's malicious or fueled by spite, just devoid of hope and passion, complacent in the shitty world he lives in. And all of this gets rectified by our Saiyan. So much of Daima is committed to seeing Goku through his kindness and passion leaving positive impacts on those around him. While this is almost cartoonishly spit out to the viewer in the last couple of episodes, with Goku and Gloria's relationship coming full circle, and King Kadan literally thanking Goku for everything he's done, it is also masterfully drip-fed to the viewer throughout the show. Quickly into the story, Goku becomes known to the Gendarmerie Force, and by episode 8, he's a local folk hero celebrated throughout the land. Neva's hope for the future of the Demon Realm is restored through Goku's genuine want to challenge and grow himself, and by the story's climax, Goku has convinced others to fight alongside him for what's right. Subtle character arcs building and hiding behind beautiful climactic fight scenes are all throughout Daima. Seeing Glorio come to care for Pansy, or the innocence of Ku and Du rubbing off on Arinsu, and Arinsu herself being swayed to do good due to the actions of Goku and her student, is what Dragon Ball is all about. Dragon Ball Daima is a wonderful gift, infusing beautiful nostalgia and childish antics with shonen clashes that define both the classic and new age. The show is oozing with charm, and it's clear that through every level of production there was an abundant amount of care and effort put into it to ensure that fans from any and all sides of the Dragon Ball community would have a magical experience worthy of being tethered to the name Akira Toriyama. At its core, it's a show about fearless discovery of a strange, savage new world, yet through courage, optimism, and perseverance, the world and the people within it are changed and transformed for the better. And if that's not a Dragon Ball series worth celebrating, then I don't really know what is. Thank you.